The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Yes, hello, good evening. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. It is so wonderful to have you back for another live reading, continuing with this excellent book, The Milner Fabian Conspiracy, published in 2012, the year that everything ended, according to the Mayans, but I'm not sure if that actually was the case. But certainly, one wonderful thing that did happen that year was that this book was published, and now we are here benefiting from the astute, scholarly, in-depth, dedicated research that this Romanian historian has gone to the trouble of amassing and assembling into this 500-page book. We're on part 10 of the series tonight, and we are going to be starting chapter 6. There's 10 chapters in this book altogether, and each one of them, I would say, is quite standalone. They each deal with a different topic. We've had a history of the Fabian socialists. We have looked at the Royal Institute for International Affairs. We've even learned about the Council on Foreign Relations. Spoiler alert, they're both the same thing. And tonight, we are going to be looking at the EU scam. That's the name of the title, the chapter. The EU scam. So, very good to have you back if you're tuning in live, and if you're watching on the replay, please avail yourself of the pinned comment below the video. There's some timestamps in there, and you can use those to navigate to the part of the video that you feel is most worthy of your precious time and attention. And I'll have to say something a little bit there on the topic of time and attention. It is December the 31st, 2024. It is the last day of the year, and we are now into the final 5 hours of the last day of the year. I'm broadcasting from England, and here it's 7:10. We are currently experiencing some weather warnings. Heavy rain, flooding is anticipated, and they've put the flood defenses up in the area where I live, and so it's pretty exciting. But I've been spending the day with my wife, reflecting on the year that's just gone by and the year that is upcoming, and having conversations largely around what have we learned, what have we achieved, what are the good memories, and what can we look forward to for the next year that's coming. And one of the things that I talked about and reflected on was this channel, my efforts here on YouTube and now Rumble and Odyssey, and the excellent time that I've had reading books and live streaming, the things that I've learned, the relationships and the friendships that I've made has been a truly humbling and wonderful experience. And so I am extremely grateful to anybody who chooses to spend their time and attention on the work that we are doing here. It's not really work that I'm doing. It's a group effort. It really would be nothing if nobody tuned in to check it out. And so it's a real humbling thing that fills my heart with joy that people do tune in and leave comments and say hello and get some value from the work that's being done. But as I often say, it's not all about me. It's really about the books and the authors and the messages and the information contained therein. We are heading into strange times. We've been living in strange times. We were born into strange times. In fact, that's kind of what we are uncovering on this channel. But I think they're going to get a whole lot stranger before they settle down. And there's all sorts of crazy, wild, attention-grabbing stuff out there on the internet. And some of it is probably worth our time. Most of it is probably not. Much of it is created by software. It is edited. It is fake, false news, information that has no merit and is not reliable, and yet is extremely enticing and entertaining, and it is alluring, and we can get very obsessed with tumbling down the rabbit hole trying to find the truth. What is the truth? What's really going on? And it can be quite exhausting, even though it is thrilling, and it can become somewhat of a bad habit. And so what I try to do here on the channel, for anybody who's new or is checking this out for the first time, is to slow things down a little bit and to spend some time reading books. Let's look at the books. These books they don't grow on trees, although they are made of trees. But books are artifacts which belie a great deal of care and effort and energy and time. And as we talked about the preciousness of time and attention, imagine what it takes to invest your time and then have a 500-page book at the end of it, well-referenced, researched, and resourced with hundreds of other footnotes and sources to back up the contents, right? It's not like the person... Well, in the case of this book, Ioan Ratiu, it's not like he just put a load of random words together, made it all up, and was spinning a yarn from his imagination. Not that that's an easy thing to do, but he's going in deep, reading the sources, doing the research, and tying it all together into a narrative that tries to help people to make sense of what's going on in the world. And for my money, books are our best resource at this point in time. Yes, it's all very well and good that we have search engines and we've got these chat bots that mimic human interaction, and we have the Wikipedia, and what else do we have? YouTube, all these other resources, all these talking heads. It's an incredible time to be alive because of the access to information that we have. But I think that with the advent of AI tools and software, and AI, I often like to refer to it as artificial information, because these chatbots, these large language models, have been proven time and time again to make things up and be unreliable and to spit out non-verified information as though they just fill in the blanks and make stuff up and pass it off as real. That happens. That's a thing that goes on out there. And so for my money, let's dial it back a little bit. Let's be grateful for this technology, use it to stay in touch and communicate and help uplift other people who are curious, and try and help them to satiate their appetite for information and for learning. But let's do it on a foundation that is solid, a foundation of real tangible things that exist in the real world, that are books, So that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is reignite people's interest in these physical objects and show you that a lot can be said in a book that cannot be said in a 5-minute YouTube clip or a 10-minute or even an hour-long documentary. Even, an hour-long documentary is going to have some information in it, but nowhere near as much as a book that might take you 20 or even 30 hours to read. You are going to get a much more highly concentrated dose of information when you engage in reading a book. And as I was talking to Melissa the other day on cuttingthroughthematrix.com, we were discussing the power of reading and how it's something you do that requires you to engage your imagination. And so if you compare it to vegetating in front of your favorite box set or back-to-back never-ending episodes of whatever on Netflix, this is a passive activity, and you are just opening your mind and somebody else is filling it up with the stories and the words, the scripts, the ideas, the imagery, the sounds that they have chosen for you. And do they have your best interests at heart? Probably not. Why would they? They want you to sit there and vegetate for as long as possible, because the longer you sit there vegetating, staring at the screen, the more money they make. So why not break that habit, spend a bit of time interacting with written words on a page? You can literally communicate with dead people by reading books. It's that powerful, right? People who are long gone, who will never be able to sit down and have a cup of tea with, left these artifacts for us to explore and learn from and benefit from. And that, to me, is more mind-bogglingly amazing than any cutesy little chat GPT bot making up a poem or writing a funny song, although some of the songs that AI writes are pretty funny, I'll admit that. But it's mind-boggling to me that books exist, that we can buy them for cheap, dirt cheap. You can get books for dirt cheap these days. What did I get? I got a new one today. Just came through the post. Quite excited about this one. I'll show you. Bit of treasure came through my letterbox today, as it does most days, in fact. But here. So this is a book. It's called The Rothschilds. And that's it's by a guy called Frederick Morton. And that is their insignia or emblem or crest on the front. And I've got quite a few books on the Rothschilds, but I didn't have this one. I'd never heard of it. And this guy is actually a novelist, and he's written a dramatization of the origins and the lives of the Rothschilds. And I thought, cool, I'll have that. It was less than £10, including postage and packaging. The book cost me less than £10. So I grabbed it, I got it, and it came through the door. And I had a quick flick through to have a look at it. So this was published in 1962. Right, so before the internet, back when you actually had to put some effort into researching and learning, because you had to dig up dusty tomes and scour through libraries and find other things to read and reference. He's got a bibliography in the back referring to a bunch of a bunch of books about the Rothschilds, but this one in particular, The Romance of the Rothschilds by Ignatius Boller. We've read that on the channel. That's on the YouTube playlist. And then on the very last page, I found this, and I thought, what the heck is this? It's like a folding out insert, and if I fold it out, I'm not going to get the whole thing on the camera, right? But you can see on the left there, this is Meyer Amschel Rothschild. And then the next column along has his many, many children, sons and daughters. And this is a family tree of the Rothschild family with birth dates, with the death dates, the people they married, and the children that they spawned, going right up to the 30s and 40s, or right up to when the book was published, in fact. So just for that little thing, that little artifact folded up in the back, I had no idea that was in here when I bought this book. I didn't know at all. But that alone makes it worth the price, in my opinion. Because if the internet ever goes down, if the Rothschild archive online gets restricted for whatever reason, which I believe it did. There's a Rothschild archive online, and it used to be free to view, and anyone could go in there and have a look at it. And then at some point in the last year, they made it so that you have to log in. So they want to know your email address. You can still look at it and check it out, but they want some details. They want some data. They want some of your precious data. And so now you've got to give up a chunk of your information if you want to have a look at that. So, but they can't restrict me from looking at that book that I'm going to have on my shelf now for the rest of my life. If I want to check out something about the family tree, who married who, the names of the daughters, if I want some names to investigate and to look up when I'm interested in learning about that family, I can do so without having to, scan my eyeball to log into Google and hand over a pint of blood so that I can have a look at the particular online resource that has been locked down, right? So the power and the value of books, I cannot overstate it enough. And while I'm on the topic of books, Melissa's here in the chat. We had a conversation the other night about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World Revisited. Now, this book blew my socks off. I couldn't believe some of the things I was reading when I went through it. And that conversation with Melissa is going to be posted on her channel at some point in the upcoming week, I believe. So keep an eye out for that. It's definitely one to have a look at. If you are sort of new to learning about these kind of agendas and these sorts of mindset that the world controllers have, that book, that little 160-page book, will tell you more in its less than 200 pages than probably 200 hours of watching Alex Jones on InfoWars or one of the many hundreds of other conspiratainment talking heads out there, right? You could just read a book written by a guy who was born into this class of people, and he'll lay it out for you. He'll talk about the mind control. He'll talk about the chemical castration of the lower classes. He'll talk about the use of propaganda and how so-called democratic societies are actually run and what is actually going on in them. And I won't give you any spoilers because I would like people to go and check that out on Melissa's channels when it is posted. I think on Thursday, but if not Thursday, then certainly by this time next week, it'll be up. And I'll post it on my socials as well. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be good. But yeah, thank you for your precious time and attention and for sharing in my enthusiasm for books and reading. It is truly humbling and wonderful to see such excellent people showing up in the chat as Frank and Melissa, and we've got Gwen as well. We've got Rose too, and also Awaken Your Mind. So lovely indeed to have you all here. Good evening, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you all. Wonderful indeed. Rumble and Odyssey, we are broadcasting to those places as well, and also Entropy. And so if you fancy at any point a change of scene, you get bored with YouTube, then you can always go over there and check it out, can't you? Why not? So tonight we are starting a new chapter, and this chapter, I looked ahead, is 100 pages long. So there's no way that we're going to get it done in this one reading, because I got to go at some point celebrate the new year with my wife and spend some time with her. So we'll probably do maybe 40 pages or so of the chapter. But before we get to that, I do have a little bit of a preamble ramble prepared for you. So let's go into that right away. So this is something that I've talked about on the show before, which is quite a while. It was probably about a year ago when I last discussed it, I think. So the topic tonight is the European Union. And the first thing I did was I went to Wikipedia and I had a look at the page for the European Union, and it's long and detailed. And what I noticed was that there was something missing. So if you recall, the last chapter we read was the United Nations, was about the United Nations. And we reviewed a Wikipedia page entitled Criticisms of the United Nations. And at the very top of that list of criticisms was the accusation that the United Nations is guilty of moral relativism. And that was top of the list, which was quite surprising. So when I went to the Wikipedia page for the European Union, I thought, okay, let's have a look for criticisms of the European Union. And I scrolled and I did a little Control F search, and there is no page on Wikipedia charting the criticisms of the EU. So apparently that must mean that there are no criticisms of the EU, and it is just a benevolent, faultless organization, pure of intention, and it's there to do good things. And case closed. Why? We can end the stream there, because if there's nothing on Wikipedia about it being criticized, then surely it must be there must be nothing to criticize about it, right? Well, I think Ioan Ratiu is going to give us a little different story when we get into the reading tonight. So, because I couldn't find a Wikipedia page on criticisms of the EU, I thought back to other topics and reading that I'd done around the EU, and I remembered about this page, which is the Charlemagne Prize. So the Charlemagne Prize, when I first heard about it, surprised me, right? To use a very bad pun there, I was surprised about the Charlemagne Prize when I learned of it. And you might be interested to learn about it too if you haven't heard about it before. Before we get into that, Melissa just says that our Brave New World Revisited conversation is going up Thursday, the 2nd of Jan. Yes. So there you go. You've got a date to look forward to that. I certainly enjoyed those conversations. And we've also already got our next book lined up, which we announce on that video. So yeah, thank you for that, Melissa. So the Charlemagne Prize, what is it? Well, it is a prize awarded for work done in the service of European unification. So the European Union is nothing if not some sort of effort at European unification, right? It says it right there on the tin. It is the European Union. In April 2008, the organizers of the Charlemagne Prize and the European Parliament also created a youth prize, which recognizes contributions by young people towards the process of European integration. And patrons of this foundation are King Philippe of Belgium, King Philippe VI of Spain, and Henri, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. So curious that kings, royalty, This class of people who have traditionally been very nationalistic, charged with overseeing and ruling over their particular patch of dirt and the peoples therein. It's quite curious that they would be the sponsors of an effort to unify and merge and smoosh together all the different countries that are inside this area of the world called Europe. I think it's a bit strange anyway. But what's the history of this prize, right? And how did it get its excellent name, Charlemagne? Well, the history is that on December 1949, Kurt Pfeiffer presented to a reading group that he founded his proposals, which were to give an annual presentation of an international prize for the most valuable contribution in the services of Western European understanding and in the services of humanity and world peace. So it's already started, from the very beginning, it's starting to sound a little bit like world government, new world order, the human family, the erasure of the differences and the standardizing, homogenizing efforts of the industrial, scientific society that has been planned for us for many years. So it aligns very nicely with that. The first recipient of the Charlemagne Prize was Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi, and he was the founder of the Pan-European movement. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this guy today. Suffice to say that I have talked about him before, and there's a little bit of a controversy around some of his writings with regards to what's known as the Kalergi Plan, which some people assert is a plan to dilute the people of Europe and turn them into a sort of, I think he uses the word negroid race, where because of intermarriage and interbreeding between different races and because of immigration and the importation of peoples from different countries and then the inevitable mixing of that, those different races, that there would be a sort of a new race born of that. And Kalergi describes this in his books, right? But he's a very interesting character. And I have a biography on my shelf, which is called Hitler's Cosmopolitan Bastard. So that's a book that you can look up if you want to learn a little bit more about von Coudenhove-Kalergi. I think if you want to understand what's going on in Europe at the moment, this is a pretty good place to start, and particularly the list of recipients that we're going to have a look at in a moment. But the prize was first awarded to this gentleman, and then after that, the Prime Minister Alcide de Gasperi was awarded it because he was promoting the unity of Europe. The award sponsors assert that the list of Charlemagne Prize winners reflects the history of the European process of unification, commonly referred to as European integration. And I'll just pause there and apologize if you can hear fireworks going on. People are very happy about this year being over, apparently so much so that they want to let off lots of explosives. So if the mic's picking that up and it's coming through, that's what's going on. It isn't that war has just suddenly broken out in this part of England. That's just fireworks. But yes, European integration. At whose behest? Who wants this to happen? Is it the people of Europe or all the people of Europe, the Germans and the French and the Spanish, etc., standing around saying, do you know what we need in our country? More people who aren't like us. That's what we need. We really want that. Well, I wish somebody would just import a load of people who are nothing like us from different cultures, because that would really make things better around here. It's kind of hard to believe when you put it like that, isn't it? But the description on Wikipedia at least says that it is directed at a voluntary union of the European peoples without constraint. Okay, so voluntary, well, we all know what the word voluntary means when it comes to the likes of the UN. I've talked about that on a previous video in this series, where it says something like countries that aren't members of the UN can still be punished even if they don't want to join the UN. But it's voluntary to join, which makes perfect sense. But it's directed at this voluntary union so that in their newfound strength they may defend the highest earthly goods, freedom, humanity, and peace. So it's starting to sound a bit like the enforcement of peace, which is the raison d'être of the European Union, to force everyone to be peaceful, right? So a quick look at the recipients. We mentioned Kalergi got it first. Churchill got it in 56. And then the European Commission itself as a whole was awarded it in 69. Roy Jenkins in 72. And I didn't know who he was, but he was a president of the European Commission. Then Kissinger got it, right? So Kissinger, a diplomat, a manipulative, deep state, worm-tongue whisperer of policy into the ears of various political puppets over the many, many years that he was alive. I think over 100 years. I think he died at 100 last year or the year before or something. And despite dying, he managed to publish a book just before Christmas, which was in my local bookstore. I haven't got a copy of it, but it's a follow-up to his book, The Age of AI. So that's pretty impressive. But Kissinger, he also won this award. And then Beatrix of the Netherlands. We got Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. What was interesting to me was that the Blair got this in 1999. So obviously preempting his cooperation with George Bush on their invasion of Iraq after the 2001 11th of September incident. And then Bill Clinton got it as well. And then in 2002, the euro. I don't know how you award a currency a prize, but that can be done. I suppose when you invent the prize, you get to also invent the rules. They also doled it out to Pope John Paul II, and he got an extraordinary prize. I'm not sure what that means, but for some reason, whatever he did was extraordinary. And then Angela Merkel got it in 2008. Pope Francis got it in 2016. Macron got it in 2018. And then, of course, Vladimir Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. And I know my pronunciation is terrible, but you got to give me some points for effort, right? Come on. They got it 2023. Yeah, last year. And then in 2024, it was awarded to all European Jews. And this chap called Pinchas Goldschmidt, who I don't really know anything about, but apparently he was a Russian Jew who did a lot of work for Jews in Russia. So that is the history of the Charlemagne Prize. And if you know very much at all about these people, you'll know that they are by no means the brightest and the best that we have to offer. Many of them on this list, and I don't even know a lot of them from the other countries. You know, there's plenty of names on here I'd never heard of, but the ones I do recognize, I highlighted. And it's not because I know of any good information associated with them. It's not like these people are out there doing good things and helping people along. No. They are serving the agenda. They're serving the world controllers. And so if the prize is being given to all these sorts of people, you got to wonder, like, why? And how is it still going? And what do they all have in common? And what is the prize really for? And what is European integration and European Union really all about, right? So that's a great place to start your learning, in my humble opinion. And I thought that would be a good little bit of context to have a look at and be aware of before we get into the reading tonight. I do have a couple of other tabs open. So this is Aachen. Let me get that. I heard it earlier. I think I got that right. Aachen. Okay. So the city of Aachen is the city that awards the Charlemagne Prize. So it's a city that's giving the award, which is quite interesting. Why? What about that city? And why is it giving this award? It's kind of strange, isn't it? So the thing that stood out to me on here was Aachen was constituted as the main royal residence of the Frankish Empire ruled by Charlemagne. And because of that, the city is sometimes called Cradle of Europe. It subsequently was part of the Holy Roman Empire. It served as the coronation site where 31 holy Roman emperors were crowned kings of the Germans from 936 to 1531. So deep, long history, right? A black and yellow flag and a coat of arms that looks like it has some sort of freaky looking bird on it. And that's all I picked out really of this article without dwelling on it too much. But that link to the Holy Roman Empire going way, way, way back and it being the coronation site kind of suggests to me that the people it's bestowing this award upon are somehow continuing the work maybe of the Holy Roman Empire or somehow involved in the legacy and there's got to be more history there to flesh out and to map out and to chart. But that is the link that really stood out to me, and I thought, that's quite curious that this city where all these Holy Roman emperors are being coronated is still actively doling out awards and prizes to a bunch of very questionable characters with checkered pasts, to put it mildly. And so what about the person of Charlemagne himself who lends his name to the prize? Well, he was king of the Franks from 768 and king of the Lombards from 774 and emperor of what is now known as the Carolingian Empire from 800. And these are all years, these numbers. It's kind of it's strange to hear years being described in 3-digit numbers. I always think of it as, like 1648 or 1892. It's always so to be saying like the year 768 is kind of odd. But these are years. I should qualify that. He died in 814. He united most of Western and Central Europe and was the first recognized emperor to rule from the west after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, approximately 3 centuries earlier. He became king of the Franks in 768, as we just mentioned. His reign saw a period of expansion that led to the conquests of Bavaria, Saxony, and northern Spain, as well as other campaigns that led Charlemagne to extend his rule over a large part of Europe. Extend his rule means, plunder, pillage, rape, battle, fight, kill, and murder your way over a large part of Europe, I think. But the only point it makes that explicit is when it says Charlemagne spread Christianity, often by force, which I thought was quite a humorous little parenthesis there. So he's forcing people to be saved by Christ, because that's how it works, isn't it? You will be saved or I'll kill you. In 800, Charlemagne was crowned emperor in Rome by Pope Leo III. And through his assumption of the imperial title, he is considered the forerunner to the line of Holy Roman emperors, which persisted into the 19th century. So again, talking about there being a lineage, a line, a continuity that changes titles and changes form, but is actually, the reason it does that is so people think it's gone away or that a new thing has come up and taken its place. But actually, it's the same continuity all the way through. The small minority of human beings lording over everybody else, withholding information and knowledge, using that knowledge gap to increase their own power, influence, and wealth. That's the story of history since time immemorial, and we are told this history that, we had kings and queens, and then we had democratic governments, and then we had dictators, and then we had fascism, and then we had communism, and then we had different isms. But it's been the same pyramidal structure throughout time. Tiny elite controlling everybody else, milking them for money, using them essentially as slaves, seeing them as chattel. And I'll just plug again that this book, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, really wonderfully, excellently captures that mindset of the so-called quote-unquote elite, but they are nothing of the sort. As we've said on this channel many times, they are cowards, they are parasites, they do not know how to create, they only know how to destroy, control, and, for that reason, they will never have what you and I have, which is the ability to be individuals, the ability to be creative, to love, to be compassionate, to make beauty in the lives of ourselves and the people we care about. they're never going to have that ability, which is, it's really sad for them when you think about it like that. But there's an ongoing continuity which goes all the way back to, these early years. Let's see. So this is Charlemagne. He had that. So he's considered the forerunner to the line of Holy Roman Emperors. And then the city where those Roman emperors were ordained or coronated is still doling out prizes to the likes of Tony Blair and Henry Kissinger and Angela Merkel. But anyway, back to Charlemagne. He was succeeded by his only surviving legitimate son, Louis the Pious. And after Louis, the Frankish kingdom was divided and eventually coalesced into West and East Francia, which later became France and Germany. So, I didn't know that. Very interesting history. So Charlemagne's empire, his area that he controlled, was divided, and that then became France and Germany. And we always think of France and Germany as two distinct countries. They actually have the same, there are two branches with the same root, okay? So this idea of reuniting all of the countries in Europe, but presumably it's not for the benefit of the people in those countries. No. It's for the benefit of that tiny ruling clique who used to rule over massive swaths of land, but then it got broken up, split up and divided, and they want to regain that area that they used to control and lord over. That's what it sounds like to me. It says in the article that Charlemagne's profound influence on the Middle Ages and influence on the territory he ruled has led him to be called the father of Europe by many historians. Now, this bit really stood out to me, which goes into the etymology of his name. It says several languages were spoken in his world, and he was known to contemporaries as Carlus in the Old High German, which he spoke. He was known as Carlo to early Old French speakers, and as Carolus in medieval Latin, the formal language of writing and diplomacy. Charles is the modern English form of these names. So you've got the current king, formerly known as Prince Charles, here in the UK, sharing a name with Charlemagne, who gives his name to the prize that is handed out to the people who work towards the unification of Europe. So I thought that was quite a curious little tidbit. And Charlemagne itself means Charles the Great in French. And Charlemagne was named after his grandfather, Charles Martel. So pretty interesting stuff. Massive article here to tell you lots more details if you're interested in it. I didn't have time to go through all of it, but I did jump down here to wives, concubines, and children on the topic of family trees and timelines. You'll see here that he had a lot of wives and a lot of concubines and a lot of children, and actually at least 20 children with his wives and other partners. And a lot of these children became, there was a duke. The king of Italy was Charlemagne's offspring. Then a co-emperor and senior emperor and king of Aquitaine. Don't know where Aquitaine is. Then there's also an abbess and abbots, lots of abbots as well. It looks like the children that were born out of wedlock ended up being allowed to work or to live in the religious side of the religious world of things, right? So it says that he had at least 20 children with his wives and other partners, and he was determined that all his children, including his daughters, should receive an education in the liberal arts. And that bit just stood out to me because the liberal arts is what has been totally removed from the mainstream education slash government indoctrination that we all must go through, or many of us must go through. An education in the liberal arts would be your trivium and your quadrivium, classical methodology of learning how to learn, and then applying that to number, mathematics, and number in space, number in time, and number in space and time, which is geometry, music, and astrology, I think, respectively. that's what's been taken away. You don't learn how to learn in school anymore. You just learn a load of facts and trivia and get told that if you can regurgitate them and write the correct trivia and facts down on a piece of paper within a given time span, you get a pat on the head and your life will be fine. And don't worry about learning how to manage money. Don't worry about learning how to negotiate or start businesses or be a consultant. No. Don't worry about any of that. Just learn about regurgitating trivia. That's all you will ever need for the rest of your life. Thank you very much, government schooling. So I'm glad that Charlemagne was, pretty ahead of his time, insisting that his daughters even receive an education in the liberal arts. So, I wouldn't mind so much if the plan was to bring back the liberal arts to all the educational institutions in Europe. But I have a feeling that's not part of the agenda. All right. So that's our little preamble ramble today. The Charlemagne Prize. If you want to have a look and do some of your own digging and learning about who is responsible, this is a really good place to start. And you can begin with Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi, and they give out one of these every single year. So plenty of names on that list to look at and learn about. So, hope you enjoy that. Yes, we got over on YouTube, Frank saying, crikey, the Charlemagne Prize is like a disease. They're all getting it. And Shame Anarchist says, we don't get taught how to think. We get told what to think. Precisely. Yeah, well said. And good to see you as well, Shame Anarchist. And then we got Heidi over on Rumble, who says, I named one of my chickens after Charlemagne's mum. She had really big feet. That is awesome. I want to find out who Charlemagne's mum was now. He's just talking about his birth year. He doesn't really talk about his parents. I'd probably just say it somewhere on here. Born, reign, burial, spouses, father, mother, Bertrada. Bertrada. That's a heck of a name, isn't it? Reminds me of our good friend Bertie Russell. Heidi says, Bigfoot Bertha. That's a great name for a chicken. And the animal itself, chicken, is kind of suiting, because I often say that the people who are running all these scams and schemes and agendas, they're cowards because they don't do it out in the open. They, as far as they'll go is to write it down in a book, and then they'll simultaneously condition people to never read books. So it's a coward's way of doing it. It's kind of like whispering the truth under your breath when someone's back is turned and they're on the phone and there's a stereo speaker blasting out music, and then be like, well, I told you, didn't you hear me? It's not my fault you didn't hear me. I told you. It's a very cowardly way of doing it. And, now that I say that, and I'm riffing on the idea of the animal chicken, and we often use chicken to denote somebody who's cowardly. I actually think that's pretty harsh on chickens, so I'm not going to call these people chickens. I'm just going to stick and call them cowardly parasites. And I think chickens in many cases are probably much more noble creatures with a lot more value and a lot more to give and offer the world than these parasites who we are tracking and trying to understand on this channel. But thank you for that contribution, Heidi. I appreciate it very much. So that's it for the preamble, and we're going to get into the book, because as I mentioned, we got 40 pages to get through. So just before we do that, I will go back over here and show you allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews if you want to find out where I live stream, which social media ghettos I hang around in, if you want to get my email address, and if you are inclined to send a donation of any kind, any amount, it's all appreciated. There are many ways to do that, but more importantly, at the top of here, you can go to my free community over on the school platform, which I'm very excited about, and that is going to be starting tomorrow. And this is the community. It's called Devised. And in this community, we are going to be reading more books. We're going to be holding a book club, and we're going to be building community around solving this problem of screen addiction. And so if you sign up and you join, and it's free at the moment, then you can get access to the calendar here. And on the calendar, you'll be able to click on these events, and you'll find a handy little Zoom link. And then you can join the Zoom call and get involved. And I put these sessions together because I would really like to spend more time face-to-face with the audience, with you, right? It's all well and good me sitting here talking to you, and you can type your comments and whatnot into the chat, and I love that. But it'd be even better if we could get together on a call and have some real-time face-to-face interaction, and I could hear your wonderful voice and look at your beautiful face, and we could do that in a way that is supportive and productive and helpful and beneficial to our learning and our understanding. So that's the purpose of having this community. And here are the books that we're going to be reading in the book club. 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Gerrymander being the first. We're going to move on to Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. We're going to go to Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. And then we're going to go to Technological Slavery. And then who knows where we'll go from there. But the whole point is that instead of just listening to me ramble on about books and what I've read, that we can get together and we can all ramble together in a safe environment, free from judgment, that is geared towards mutual learning and understanding and appreciation of community, camaraderie, and cooperation. Because for my money, screen addiction is one of the main problems that is facing us today. I think it is absolutely crippling us on so many different levels in so many different ways. So if we can get together and understand the problem, where it comes from, how it works, and then how to solve it, I think that would be very powerful indeed. And so in preparation for the kickoff of my community, I have been reading books on screen addiction. I've read 3 so far. Well, addiction and screen addiction. I'll show you those quickly. So this is the one that I just finished reading, The Smartphone Addiction Restriction. This one was very good. Very short, easy book to read. Probably about 130 pages or so. Then I read this book, No Smoking, by my friend, James McFadden. And this, yes, it's about smoking, but it's about addiction in general, what causes addictive behavior, the internal mechanisms which drive behavior that we can become aware of, that we can change and alter so that we can take back our control over our own actions. Because it's kind of crazy, isn't it, that we, in many cases, feel like we don't control ourselves. When we are ourselves, I am me, but I don't have myself under control. I can't just choose to quit smoking or choose to stop doing that habit that's bad for me, right? So this book is a very easy read. It's entertaining. It's got activities and things, you know, it's something you got to take part in. And I very highly recommend that. You can get that for free, actually, at the No Smoking website. But that's the second one I read. The third one I read was Trapped in the Web, How I Liberated Myself from Internet Addiction and How You Can Do It Too. And that was pretty good too. This one did a really good job of describing the problem. Not as good at describing the solutions, but a good place to start. And the next one I'm going to be reading is over here. And it is a book called Irresistible, Why You Are Addicted to Technology and How to Set Yourself Free. So I'm going to be starting that very soon. That's a bit longer and a little bit, I think, a bit heftier with more references and notes in the back. Tiny writing, always a good sign. So that's devicedschool.com/deviced. But to find any and all of the links relevant to me and to Hayes Reviews, you can go to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, and that should be pinned at the top of the chat on Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube. So you got no excuses. Click the link, go and explore it, have a look around, and that would be lovely. So, with that said, we're about ready to get into tonight's reading. Got to move a few things around. And before we do, I'm just going to say cheers. Tonight, I am drinking a delicious can of cold beer. Yes, it is actually cold beer. The least imaginative title for a drink ever invented. And that's not an endorsement, and I'm not sponsored by that company. I just happen to like that drink because it's kind of weak, and it's smooth, and it's refreshing, but it doesn't leave you with a stinking hangover the next day. So, well done for making it through 2024. I hope you're all feeling good about 2025. And, hey, another year down, right? You made it this far. That's worth something. That really is worth something. So I'll drink to everybody out there. and say it's been a great year for me. I've been reflecting today on the many wonderful experiences and memories that I've made and things that my wife and I have accomplished together, and just generally feeling very grateful, very blessed, very lucky and honored and privileged for the things I get to do in life and where I'm at. And I hope other people hearing this have a similar sense of the beauty of life and what can really be found if we are discerning, if we are vigilant, if we pay attention, we take care not to get swept up in the torrents and the currents of the mainstream. You know, it's a stream because it's shallow. Much better to take a plunge into the deep unknown of the truth and do some delving and diving and make our own journey and our own way forward to discover who we really are, what we're really about, what we truly value. And if you haven't started that journey yet, then I'm very excited for you because it's a wonderful journey indeed. And if you have started that journey, then you'll know what I'm talking about and I don't need to keep waiting on. So here's to you. Cheers. I hope you got a drink. Because if you can't have a drink on New Year's Eve, when can you, right? Cool. Let's get into the book, which is here. Milner Fabian Conspiracy, Ioan Ratiu, How an International Elite is Taking Over and Destroying Europe, America, and the World. We'll just quickly have a look here at the chapters that we've already done. Socialism was the first chapter, and a very interesting survey of the people who inspired the socialism movement and how the efforts to roll out socialism and communism have terroristic strategies and methodologies baked in, right? You can't roll out these communism, at least you can't roll that out without terrorism. Socialism, and in particular Fabian socialism, was like, this terrorism stuff is not so good. It doesn't sit so well with us. People tend to notice when we're doing it. Let's remove that part and just do it very slowly, incrementally, step by step, boiling the frog in the pot. In other words, people won't notice. They'll think we're doing it for their benefit because we love them and care about them and we're making things better for them, when in fact it's a slow, roundabout march towards communism. Socialism, though, that was a great chapter. Fabian Conspiracy was a huge 70-page survey on the history of the Fabian Society, which complemented very nicely the reading that we did of Fabian Freeway by Rose Martin. Then we had a nice little punchy chapter on the Labour Party and its origins, particularly relevant because the Labour Party is currently in office here in the UK. Then the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs. These are the think tanks, the private organizations which decide upon, define and dictate policy to our political puppets that we have in office and that they roll out on the talk shows and that give them scripts to read and stand them in front of microphones and we blame and we throw tomatoes at them and we hate them and we boo and we get it all caught up in the drama of that. They're taking their marching orders from groups, private groups such as the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and two very fascinating chapters diving into those organizations, their history, where they came from, what they're all about, and the tendrils that they have put out into the various governments of the countries that we live in. Chapter 6, the last one, was an absolute humdinger. We read that one through on the winter solstice, shortest day of the year, longest stream ever done on this channel, and the UN scam was where everything came together in that chapter. And it was really powerful because it showed you that this attempt to build more, to centralize power in fewer and fewer hands has been the goal from day one, and it is well underway. And there is not very much resistance to it. There are not many people who are skeptical about the UN and the EU, and the people who are tend to be poo-pooed, dismissed, with some hand waving and some label of conspiracy theory or a nutcase or whatever it may be. And you would never look at the UN the same way again after reading that chapter. And I need to go back and re-listen to it. And that was 40 pages long. Now we are embarking upon chapter 7, which is the EU scam. And you can see here, 232 pages is the page it starts. It goes all the way to the page 339. So that is 107 pages long. This is a massive chapter. And I have a feeling this is going to be another game changer. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So I'm going to stop prattling on and we'll get right into it, shall we? So I think we'll do about 40 pages. I looked ahead. We've got 2 sections to get through. And let's line this up so it is nice and neat. And let's continue with chapter 7, the EU scam. The European Union is an organization of European states ostensibly created to prevent wars between member states through economic and political cooperation. However, its critics have described the EU as an undemocratic, quote, illegal, and even, quote, criminal organization. Others have referred to it as, quote, a monster that regulates everything. The historian of the European Union, John Gillingham, has shown that Britain has had very little to gain from membership in the EU, especially in economic terms. Moreover, various opinion polls have shown that about half of the UK population wants to leave the EU. On the continent, EU members are similarly dissatisfied, and a significant number of Germans and French believe their countries would have been better off if they had not joined the euro. And the references for this is the BBC, and there's a poll published on CNN. And interesting that what we just learned as well about Charlemagne, the origins of Germany and France as the same country, which split once Charlemagne passed on, and they prefer it that way by the sounds of it, or a decent proportion of the people living there prefer it that way. So, why the EU is a scam? The following are some of the reasons why the EU is a scam. 1. The EU was the creation of Milner Fabian circles for the benefit of private business and political interests. 2. The EU is part of a plan to establish world government by the private, unelected elite groups which created it. 3. The EU is an undemocratic project enabling unelected foreign elites to rule over sovereign nations. 4. EU policies have made Europe subservient to non-European interests. 5. EU immigration policies are leading to the gradual replacement of Europe's indigenous population with non-Europeans. 6. The EU is a parasitic body which costs about 144 billion euros a year, in addition to further hundreds of billions extracted through import duties, VAT, administrative and compliance charges, etc. 7. The EU has been accused of shocking financial irregularities. Former European Commission Chief Accountant Marta Andreasen has revealed that 80% of the EU budget is, quote, suspect, while for many years the European Court of Auditors, which audits the collection and spending of EU funds, has refused to sign off the EU accounts due to irregularities in the books. And that's from a BBC News article. 8. The current financial and economic crisis sweeping across the EU is proof positive that the EU is not fit for purpose and is incapable of providing financial and economic stability. And we'll just say good night to Melissa because she's having to leave. But thank you very much for your comment. Happy New Year. I'm so grateful that we are in touch and we get to read books and talk about them together. It has definitely been one of the highlights of my year to establish that relationship. And everyone go on over to cuttingthroughthematrix.com where you will get an unparalleled education in the ways of the world for free. And yeah, that's all I can say about that, really. Get on over there. Why are you wasting time on Haze Reviews? Go over to cuttingthroughthematrix.com. check it out. Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate that. Shame Anarchist 2, heading off. Got to get up early tomorrow. I hope the first day of 2025 treats you well. And thanks for dropping by and leaving some comments and saying hello tonight. I appreciate it very much. Happy New Year. All right. Continuing with the origins of the EU. The idea of a United States of Europe goes back to the time of Richard Cobden and Victor Hugo, a left-wing French novelist and politician with socialist leanings. In August 1849, the Anglo-American Peace Society convened an international congress at Paris, which was presided over by Victor Hugo and the British manufacturer and liberal activist Richard Cobden, whose assistant was John Passmore Edwards. In his inaugural address, Hugo called for a United States of Europe. In 1867, he set up the League of Peace and Freedom to promote his plan for a united Europe. Although Hugo's project was rejected by Marx and Engels as a bourgeois idea, by which they indicated their displeasure at not having come up with it themselves, Engels later declared himself in favour of it, stating that everything is making in the direction of a United States of Europe. It soon became widespread among Marxists and was taken up by Wilhelm Liebknecht, founder of the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Germany. The German Karl Kautsky, the Russian Vladimir Lenin, and other European Marxists followed suit in 1911 to 1914. In early 1900s Britain, the idea of an international organisation was regarded as radical and normally associated with socialism or Fabianism. Indeed, it was the Fabian-created Independent Labour Party which took it up in 1914, formally adopting it as official party policy in the following year. An early advocate associated with the ILP was Arthur Ponsonby, a leading liberal who later joined the Labour Party. World War I put the idea of a United States of Europe on ice for some time. However, by early 1918, it was adopted as a war aim by the Labour Party and its continental allies and was put back on the agenda by the left after the war, winning wide support among various factions from Lenin's Communist International to West European liberal groups to international financiers. One of the most influential promoters of a united Europe was the Austrian socialist Count Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi, who in 1922 founded the Pan-European Union. In the following year, Coudenhove-Kalergi wrote a document called Pan-Europa to promote his movement. Among his strongest supporters were Louis von Rothschild, head of the Austrian banking house S.M. von Rothschild and Son, and the Polish socialist Joseph Rettinger. Austria at the time was a Fabian stronghold run by President Michael Hainisch, a prominent Fabian. Coudenhove-Kalergi and his supporters belonged to the British Fabian Society's international network that included the Vienna Fabians. Another strong supporter of Coudenhove-Kalergi was French Prime Minister Aristide Briand. Briand was a leading figure in the French section of the Second International, a Fabian-dominated socialist outfit whose first president was Arthur Henderson. Briand became foreign minister in 1925 and declared his ambition to establish a, quote, United States of Europe. In 1927, he was made honorary president of Coudenhove-Kalergi's Pan-European Union. In 1929, he made a speech to the then 27 European members of the League of Nations in which he proposed a federal union. In 1930, he presented to the League a, quote, memorandum from the French government on the organization of a regime of European Federal Union. In Britain, the scheme was promoted by Sir Arthur Salter, a former Fabian Society member and a member of the Milner Group. Salter later served as head of the economic and financial section of the League of Nations Secretariat and became a leading member of Chatham House. In 1931, he published a collection of papers entitled The United States of Europe, in which he explored the building of a federal Europe, declaring that the United States of Europe must be a political ally. I'm just going to pause there for a very quick second to grab that book. from a pile of books that I have on top of the shelf there, all dealing with this topic. You'd be surprised at how many people have written books about establishing one world government and international government and new world order type organizations. But just to prove to you and show you that that is a real book, I bought a copy. Here it is. Sir Arthur Salter, The United States of Europe and Other Papers. This is a 1953 book, as you can see there, first published. And yeah, so it's a real thing. Not made up, not conspiracy theory. It's all in the books. All right, continuing. With the beginning of World War II, the European movement was suppressed on the continent, forcing its leaders to find refuge in Britain and America. This enabled the movement's Milner Fabian masterminds to run the European show directly from London, New York, and Washington. In 1940, Coudenhove-Kalergi moved the headquarters of his Pan-European Union to New York, where he became co-director of the post-war European Federation Institute at the University of New York. In 1941, he formed the American Committee for a Free and United Europe. Well, the acronym there is ACFUE, which is a great acronym. Meanwhile, Coudenhove-Kalergi's collaborator and fellow Fabian Rettinger was advised to the Polish government in exile in London. Was advisor to the Polish government in exile in London, where he was in close contact with Anglo-American Milner Fabian circles, including Chatham House. Special Operations Executive, SOE, of which Rettinger became a member, MI5, MI6, and their US counterparts, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Office of Strategic Services, and later, the Central Intelligence Agency. Above all, Rettinger was responsible for coordinating the foreign ministers of assorted European governments in exile, including Paul Henry Spaak and Paul van Zeeland of Belgium. In 1944, Spaak and his counterparts from Luxembourg and the Netherlands, Joseph Beck and Eelco Nicolaus van Kleffens, signed the London Customs Convention, which established the Benelux Customs Union. And I'm pretty sure that did Spaak win the Charlemagne Prize? He did. There you are. So, wait a sec. Don't take my word for it. I'll show you. So if we just go quickly back to this page over here, you can see that the year after Churchill won it, Paul Henry Spaak won the Charlemagne Prize for ruining Europe. So there you go. I'll highlight his name now that we know more about him. Prime Minister of Belgium and Secretary General of NATO. There you are. Okay, back to the book. In 1944, Spaak and his counterparts from Luxembourg and the Netherlands, Joseph Beck and Eelco Nicolaus van Kleffens, signed the London Customs Convention, which established the Benelux Customs Union. After the war, in 1946, Van Zeeland established the Independent League for European Cooperation and the European League for Economic Cooperation. Rettinger was appointed Secretary General of the Leagues and liaison officer with other like-minded committees. His ILEC and ELEC became the driving force behind the European movement. Rettinger and his leagues were bankrolled by David Astor, son of leading Milner Group members and friends of the Fabian leadership, Lord and Lady Astor. Astor was also a disciple of fellow Milnerite Lord Lothian, who was regarded as, quote, one of the spiritual fathers of European federalism. As editor of the influential left-wing Daily Observer, David Astor orchestrated a propaganda campaign in support of a united Europe, quote, under British leadership. French Europeanist Jean Monnet belonged to the same Milner Fabian circles. You're not going to believe this, but I'm pretty sure Monnet won the won the award as well. All right, let's go back over here. I thought I saw his name on the list. No, maybe I was imagining it. Yeah, no, I don't think he did. Apologies. I thought I'd seen Monnet on here as well. Oh, no, there you are. Boom, there it is. I didn't start higher up the list. So Monnet got it in 1953. How about that? Oops. You don't want to see all that craziness. Let's go back to the book cam. So there's a lot of these Charlemagne prize winners popping up in tonight's chapter. A former colleague of Arthur Salter in the League of Nations, Monnet used the latter's plans for a supranational European entity to design his own European coal and steel community. The ECSC was established through the April 1951 Treaty of Paris. The community included SPAC's Benelux Union as well as France, Germany and Italy, and it became operational in 1952. SPAC became president of the Common Assembly of the ECSC. In 1955, Monnet founded the Action Committee for a United States of Europe. And the acronym for that is ACCUSE, the Action Committee for a United States of Europe. Among his close collaborators were Cristian, France's Socialist Foreign Minister Guy Mollet, French President of the Socialist Group on the Council of Europe Consultative Assembly, and Vice President of the Socialist International, and Paul-Henri Spaak, former President of the European Assembly. The efforts of the above, together with financial and diplomatic backing from their Anglo-American controllers, led to the 1957 Treaty of Rome. Spaak and Pinot were among the signatories of the treaty which created the European Economic Community, aka Common Market. In 1967, the EEC became the European Community, and in 1993, the latter became the European Union. A growing number of Europeans have become openly critical of the EU, in particular following Britain's 2016 vote to leave the organisation. However, the battle can only be won through greater awareness of the true nature of the EU and its instigators. That's funny, it mentions the 2016 vote to leave the EU, and this book was published in 2012, right? Oh, I suppose 2017. Oh, this is the 5th edition. So this was published in 2017, so it was updated after Britain's vote to leave the EU. And Frank's just telling us as well in the chat on YouTube that Jean Monnet is also referred to as the father of Europe. So Europe has two fathers. That's the Europe as the state that it is in now is the product of having two fathers. That's what it sounds like. And we got Turbs over on Rumble. Good evening. Looks like you are not double and triple posting tonight, so maybe that bug has been ironed out. Very good to have you here, and Happy New Year. All right, continuing. The EU and the Milner Fabian conspiracy. And first we got an image here, which is the original ECSC flag representing Europe's 6 United States. So it started with 6. Got to start somewhere. All right. The European Union has been described as a Franco-German or even Nazi creation. Some seem to believe that Adolf Hitler was the first to use the phrase United States of Europe. Such claims are factually incorrect, unnecessarily divisive, and, conveniently, misleading. Patriotism based on disinformation cannot lead to anything good. Instead of saying, quote, the Germans, the French, or the British did this and that, the intelligence approach is to ask, quote, who were the puppeteers pulling the strings? Who were the elite cliques covertly operating behind governments and other key players on the national and international stages? That is actually a very good point. That is a more intelligent question to ask. A mere glance at the original EU flag logically suggests that the EU was not so much a Franco-German creation as a US inspiration. While the treaties establishing the European Coal and Steel Community and its successor, the European Economic Community, were indeed signed by representatives of France, Germany, the Benelux countries, and Italy, the covert involvement of Anglo-American interests in European unification has long been exposed by researchers such as F.X. Rabatet, the son of European Movement Secretary-General Georges Rabatet, Richard J. Aldrich of the University of Nottingham, Stephen Dorrell of Huddersfield University. I have books by Aldrich and Dorrell, actually. This MI6 one here, that's a Stephen Dorrell book, for example. I'm not sure what I've got by Aldrich, but I've got something. And former French intelligence officer Pierre de Villerest. Many of the key figures in Europe's federalist movement were neither French nor German. P.H. Spaak, founder of the Benelux Union, the core of the ECEU, was a Belgian. Rettinger was Polish. Coudenhove-Kalergi was Austrian-Hungarian. On the other hand, almost all, including Frenchmen like Monnet, had close links to London. Monnet himself had already been involved with the London-based Allied Coordination Committees in World War I and during World War II, was a member of the British Supply Council. Monnet's compatriot, Guy Mollet, was vice president of the Socialist International, a Fabian Society outfit run by Morgan Phillips of the Fabian International Bureau, who also doubled as General Secretary of the British Labour Party. Incidentally, Mollet was France's keenest supporter of European Union. Paul Henry Spaak was the president of the Consultative Assembly of the Council of Europe, which had been established in London in 1949 and had a strong Fabian representation. Similarly, Rettinger had close links to the London Fabian Society, and so had many others. As noted above, Coudenhove-Kalergi also belonged to Fabian circles. Apart from London, America's political and financial capitals, Washington and New York, crop up as common links between the chief protagonists in Europe's federalist saga. America, of course, financed both the Allied war effort and the reconstruction of Europe after the war. It also financed France's war in Indochina. America, therefore, naturally played a key role in European developments at the time. The American role was particularly obvious in Germany, which was under Allied occupation between 1945 and 1955, during which time East Germany was run by Soviet Russia, while West Germany was run by America, in collaboration with Britain and France. Incidentally, this is why Germany was positively not in a position to launch international projects like the European Community, let alone impose such projects on the rest of Europe. At the same time, with Europe's largest population and a large economy right in the centre of the continent, Germany was Central Europe's natural dominant power, whether its neighbours liked it or not. Despite the ravages of war, it had a potentially strong economy based on a powerful industry which was slowly but steadily recovering. Germany was also the only European country capable of stopping Soviet-Russian expansionism and saving Western Europe from Stalinism. As observed by Winston Churchill, without Germany there would not be much, quote, between the white snow of Russia and the white cliffs of Dover. In practical terms, whoever controlled Germany controlled Europe. This is why we must see who controlled Germany and whether they had anything to do with European unification. The military governors of the British zone of occupation in Germany were Field Marshal Sir Bernard, later Lord Montgomery, Air Marshal Sholto, later Lord Douglas, and General Sir Brian, later Lord Robinson. More importantly, between July 1945 and October 1951, Britain was a Fabian socialist state run by Labour Prime Minister and former chairman of the Fabian Society, Clement Attlee, who in 1939 had declared that, quote, Europe must federate or perish. The minister responsible for the British zone of occupation in Germany was none other than Labourite John Hind, a supporter of the Fabian Society Associated Socialist Vanguard Group, which campaigned for a European federation and was involved in the reconstruction of political parties in Germany. Similarly, the British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin, a Fabian socialist, and the man who held the real power in matters concerning Germany, called for a Western European Union in January 1948. Further investigation reveals close links to certain business interests at all stages of the project. Lord Selborne, the Minister of Economic Warfare, was a member of the Milner Group's inner circle. General Robertson was a close friend of General Smuts, another member of the Milner Group's inner circle. The Milner Group also dominated the Foreign Office Research and Intelligence Department, the Ministry of Information, the various agencies concerned with economic reconstruction, and the British Embassy in Washington. More than a dozen members of the group were operating in Washington during and after the war. And the reference for all that bit is Quigley, Anglo-American establishment. Among the US governors in Germany, we may mention General Dwight D. Eisenhower and General Lucius D. Clay, who were followed by John J. McCloy. Eisenhower's profile immediately puts us on the right track. In 1951, he became Supreme Commander of NATO, which in the words of its first Secretary General Lord Ismay aimed to keep the Germans down. Significantly, Eisenhower became President of the United States in 1953 with Rockefeller backing and surrounded himself with World Federalist members of the Milner Fabian Council on Foreign Relations, who were connected to Rockefeller and related Eastern establishment interests. Eisenhower's budget director, Percival F. Brundage, was co-founder of Federal Union, an organization established before the war to bring about a union of America, Britain, and Western Europe. Will L. Clayton, National Security Training Commissioner, was a co-founder of the Committee for Economic Development and vice president of the Atlantic Union Committee, which had the same aims as Federal Union. The CED had been founded in 1942 by CFR member Paul G. Hoffman of the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation and was a leading member of America's foreign policy establishment. J. D. Zellerbach of Crown Zellerbach Corporation was Eisenhower's ambassador to Italy and CED chairman. Leading CFR member John Foster Dulles was Eisenhower's Secretary of State. I'm just going to take a sip there, clear my throat. Got really tickly all of a sudden. Obviously needs more beer. Okay, continuing. So we got John Foster Dulles there as well. The mapping out of the networks, the names, the organizations, the groups is quite phenomenal here. It's quite dry. It's not sort of narrative heavy, but this is the kind of fairly dry research which gets you to an understanding of the real centers of influence and power and where policy really comes from and whose agendas are really being played out. Hint, hint, not the people that you're voting for. Nobody in any of these groups was voted for by any of us, right? And the ones we do get to vote for are surrounded by people in these groups and advised by them and who knows what else, probably blackmailed, etc. But continuing. General Clay had close links to the same money interests. On retiring in 1950, he became a leading member of the powerful U.S. Business Advisory Council, an organization run by his friend Sidney J. Weinberg of the New York investment bank Goldman Sachs & Co., with close links to the CFR. Clay later worked for General Motors and became a senior partner with the New York investment bank Lehman Brothers. Clay's advisor was Carl Friedrich, an American academic and advocate of European Union who was involved in the drafting of the German Constitution in 1949. The above facts already enable us to clearly identify two related currents of European federalism or unionism as sources of influence on German politics in the years immediately following the war: British Milner Fabian circles and US business and banking interests, especially those belonging to America's East Coast Wall Street establishment. The latter becomes even clearer if we briefly survey the case of McCloy. McCloy was a partner at the Rockefeller-associated New York law firm Milbank, Tweed, Hadley and McCloy. Member of the 1945 San Francisco Conference which drafted the UN Charter, chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation, chairman of the Rockefeller-controlled Chase Manhattan Bank, member of the Rockefeller-controlled CFR, and former president of the CFR-controlled World Bank. McCloy. I'm wondering if we could look him up quickly in, so what's he called? What's the full name? It just says McCloy. What's the gentleman's full name? I know we must have read it, but I'm struggling to find it. But we can look it up quickly. in the Fosdick book. And we'll just see if it's in the index. I think at this point we've established that Ioan Ratiu is fairly impeccable with his sources and his information. I haven't caught him out on anything, but it's always good just to check from time to time. So if this guy McCloy is mentioned in this book about the Rockefeller Foundation, doesn't look like he is actually. We've got McGill, Mayo, Medical Association, Medical Care. So it doesn't look like the name McCloy is in here. Doesn't mean it's not anywhere in the book. It just means it's not in the index. Yeah. Always good to check these things. But let's continue. It is essential to note at this point France's position on post-war Germany. Far from advocating Franco-German unity, President Charles de Gaulle called for the permanent occupation and segmentation of Germany, as well as the deportation of millions of Germans to France for slave labour. In January 1947, de Gaulle appointed Jean Monnet Plan Commissioner, in which capacity the future father of the European coal and steel community was tasked with transforming France's ailing economy. The French plan was based on French exploitation of German coal and steel industries, which were to remain under either French or international control. In other words, as far as the French leadership was concerned, Germany was to become a colony for Allied exploitation. Initial Anglo-American plans were similar, only more draconic. The Morgenthau Plan of 1944, agreed on by US President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill, called for the complete dismantling of heavy industry and the transformation of Germany into an agricultural and pastoral economy. Apart from revenge, the reason for this, as stated by Roosevelt and Lord Cherwell, was to eliminate Germany as an economic competitor to Britain. Accordingly, General Clay was instructed to, quote, decentralize the structure and administration of the German economy to the maximum possible extent. An extensive deforestation program was also imposed. Around 1 million German prisoners of war were handed over to the French as slave laborers, while others were sent to various Allied countries, including Britain and America. Some were earmarked for use by Churchill on his Chartwell estate in Kent. The Morgenthau Plan also included systematic mass starvation, which claimed over 5 million victims. Roosevelt himself declared that it would be necessary to either castrate the Germans or treat them in such a way so they cannot reproduce their own kind. On his part, Churchill spoke cryptically of tragedy on a prodigious scale, unfolding itself behind the Iron Curtain which now divided Europe, and of 70 or 80 millions in a ruined, famished condition in the heart of Europe, while insisting that they deserved it. The tragedy, in fact, was unfolding on both sides of the Iron Curtain. It was officially admitted that in the British zone alone, about 10 million Germans were kept on starvation rations, described as, quote, too much to let you die quickly, too little to let you live long. However, the international business interests behind the Allied project were keen on using the German economy for their own agenda. While atrocities against the German population continued for several years, Allied policy slowly began to change. The U-turn in Allied thinking had been initiated in December 1945 on the recommendation of Byron Price, the director of the US Office of Censorship. German economy was now to be geared to a world system. Like the rest of Europe, Germany was to be used as a market for American goods. Secretary of State George Marshall, in his Harvard speech of the 5th of June 1947, warned of the consequences to the U.S. economy should Europe's alleged need for U.S. goods not be met. Clearly, an economically strong Germany was better suited for this role than one of self-sufficient farmers and shepherds. As a unified government made it easier to control Germany, in July 1946, Marshall's predecessor, James Burns, proposed the unification of the Allied zones of occupation. This was agreed later that year with Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin, and in January 1947 the American and British zones were merged into a bizone. France initially refused to merge its own zone with the other two, but, no doubt remembering who was paying for its war in Indochina, did so in 1949. Trizone, as the entity was first known, was made into a separate state called Federal Republic of Germany. Its first capital was Frankfurt on Main, the US military government's HQ. Historian John Gimbel observes that the West German government of 1949 was conceived and delivered by the American army. This is true enough, but it is not the whole story. As the Brookings Institution's Men Who Govern shows, 86% of the US secretaries of the Army, Navy and Air Force were from a business background or former lawyers with a business practice, and this applied to the entire US top federal bureaucracy. As we have just seen, the same American Army had very close links to certain business and financial interests. Indeed, it was controlled by them. Unsurprisingly, the key guidelines for US and UK occupation forces, as set out in the official Handbook of Military Government for Germany, included control of the German finances, and particularly reconstruction of German foreign trade, with priority for the needs of the United Nations, i.e., for the needs of the Anglo-American interests who had set up the UN. In a broader sense, West Germany was the creation of America, a federal republic, in collaboration with Britain, a Fabian socialist republic masquerading as monarchy, hence Federal Republic of Germany. In any case, it's indisputable that American officials and their British collaborators, France was not party to Anglo-American planning in Germany, were responsible for the creation of that part of Germany which was involved in the formation of the European coal and steel community. It goes almost without saying that Germany's new puppet regime, headed by Konrad Adenauer, was all for a united Europe. In fact, Adenauer was an old acquaintance of the new Anglo-American order. He had already been mayor of Cologne in the 1920s when the British zone was controlled by the Milner-dominated British Army of the Rhine, Lord Milner himself being a war secretary, which was based at Cologne and commanded by General Sir William Robertson. As before, Cologne was in the British zone, only that this time round the BAOR was commanded by Robertson's son Brian and Adenauer, who had been on the run under Hitler. And Adenauer, who had been on the run under Hitler, was reappointed mayor of Cologne by the Americans. It's inconceivable that the occupying powers would have picked Adenauer had he not been a collaborator. For all practical purposes, Adenauer was Macloy's hand-picked chancellor. To understand who or what Adenauer really was, we only need to consider that in 1950, along with Spaak, Macloy and others from the same circle, the Christian Democrat Adenauer became an officer of the CFR-created World Brotherhood, which campaigned for bringing the Western and communist worlds closer together. I've never heard of the World Brotherhood before. That's a new one for me. Similarly, Adenauer's successor, the socialist Willy Brandt, who had close links to Fenner Brockway's International Revolutionary Marxist Centre, aka London Bureau, was appointed mayor of occupied West Berlin in 1957, foreign minister of West Germany in 1966, and chancellor of West Germany in 1969. In 1970, he introduced the Ostpolitik, which is East politics, approach of collaboration with the Moscow-led Eastern Bloc at the instigation of U.S. National Security Advisor, CFR Director of Foreign Policy Study, and longtime Rockefeller collaborator Henry Kissinger, also a recipient of the Charlemagne Prize. This, of course, was happening precisely at a time when Kissinger's bosses, the Rockefellers, were expanding their interests into communist countries like Russia and China. In 1976, Brandt was elected president of the British Fabian-created Socialist International, a post he held until 1992. In 1977, while serving as SI president, Brandt was appointed chair of the UN Independent Commission on International Development Issues by US presidential advisor, World Bank president, and CFR Director Robert McNamara of the Rockefeller Allied Ford Motor Company. Needless to say, Brandt's commission was staffed by operatives of the CFR-controlled World Bank. Helmut Schmidt, Brandt's successor as Chancellor from 1972 to 1982, had been one of the thousands of German POWs held at Wilton Park and subjected to intensive indoctrination in democratic processes by Milner Fabian luminaries like Richard Crossman, Bertrand Russell, Lord Beveridge, and Lady Astor. I'd never heard of Wilton Park before, but apparently it's got a website here, wiltonpark.org.uk. Probably worth typing into a browser and having a look at what's on that website. I'm just going to type here Wilton Park so I don't forget. There we go. Re-education. So continuing, nor must we forget that wider Allied re-education program which imposed Allied thinking on the entire German population. Indeed, the re-education was officially referred to as psychological warfare and defined as, quote, manipulating a population's beliefs and attitudes for the purpose of evoking desired behavior responses. This psychological warfare or conditioning continued for many years, indeed decades, after the termination of military hostilities and was conducted by Anglo-American establishment foundations like the Ford Foundation, which funded the new Free University of Berlin and similar projects. In collaboration with the State Department, CIA funded or created organizations and their British counterparts, the Foreign Office, MI6, Tavistock Institute, British Council, LSE, etc. It seems like every single group and organization is part of this network. There were, of course, some Germans who called for a united Europe. But they were either collaborators of the new Anglo-American rulers like Adenauer or representatives of Fabian-dominated international socialism like Kurt Schumacher of the Social Democratic Party. At any rate, their existence does not justify the claim that the Germans as a nation wanted, even less that they were responsible for the creation of the common market and resulting European Union. General Clay himself spoke of an Allied determination to continue the control of Germany for many years. The evidence clearly shows that the Federal Republic of Germany was a front for Anglo-American interests, and this is what it remains to this day. Chancellor Angela Merkel, recipient of the Charlemagne Prize, has been advised or directed by Goldman Sachs chiefs for many years, as well as being a member of Atlantic Brücke, an organization set up after the war by Rockefeller interests for the purpose of remote controlling West Germany from across the Atlantic. Meanwhile, one of the first to suggest Franco-German cooperation as a basis for a united Europe was former Prime Minister Mr. later Sir Winston Churchill himself. In a speech at Zurich University in September 1946, Churchill called for the creation of a United States of Europe from the Atlantic to the Black Sea, adding that the first step to European Union must be a partnership between France and Germany. Later that year, Arthur Salter discussed in Parliament Churchill's idea of a united Europe based on Franco-German cooperation, correctly pointing out that such cooperation would depend on the British zone, which included the centre of German industry. This was at a time when the new German state had not yet been created, and the French were not even dreaming of such a scheme, insisting instead on keeping Germany divided and German industry in French hands. It may come as a surprise to some to find that Churchill was a prominent member of the European conspiracy. In fact, Churchill's involvement becomes entirely natural if we have a look at his profile. His father, Lord Randolph, had already been a disciple of progressive conservatism with close links to leading Milnerites. Churchill himself was a Liberal in the 1880s and early 1900s and rejoined the Conservatives only because he felt that the Labour Party was no longer able to make an impact on British politics. This was true enough. By 1924, the Liberals had been replaced by Labour as Britain's second largest political party. Obviously, for a power-hungry politician like Churchill, a minority party like the Liberals had lost its attraction. But old habits die hard. Churchill's wife remained a Liberal, and Churchill himself remained close to Liberal circles for the rest of his life. More importantly, Churchill was close to the Milner Group and its associates and collaborators, such as Abe Bailey, Lionel Curtis, Lord Astor, Lord Birkenhead, General Smuts, Sir Arthur Salter, Sir Ernest Cassel, the Rothschilds, Sir Henry Strakosch, and the American Bernard Baruch. Some of these connections he had inherited from his father. Cassel, a Rothschild-associated banker and gold magnate, had been a close friend of Lord Randolph, as well as of King Edward VII, and later became Churchill's financial supporter. Lord Esher, Reginald Balliol Brett, who was connected with Cassel, also became a personal friend of Churchill's. A co-founder of the Milner Group, Lord Esher was a notorious string puller who turned down various public posts so that he could carry on operating behind the scenes. He had been a personal friend and political advisor to Queen Victoria and advisor to her son, King Edward VII, and grandson, King George V. Lord Randolph had also had an excessively close relationship with his financier and Milner Group co-founder, Lord Nathan Natty Rothschild. Churchill himself remained close to the Rothschilds. That quote for that is from Ferguson, Neil Ferguson's biography, Volume 2 of the Rothschilds. Churchill himself remained close to the Rothschilds and to Rothschild-associated interests like Vickers de Costa, his stockbroker, in which his younger brother Jack Churchill was a partner. Let's have a look quickly if this new Rothschild book that I got today mentions Churchill. Why not? I think it's got an index. Sometimes they don't. No index for this one, just a bibliography. So that's unfortunate. It means we can't quickly look up what's in the book. Yeah, I did mention that this is like a dramatization of the family and what they got up to. There's a bit here about the Great War. That'll probably be World War I though, won't it? The Ides of March, Dynasty and List. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know where to find it. But you never know. Churchill might be in there. I mean, if Ferguson is referring to it and making that claim, he's a real mainstream historian, and there's no reason to doubt it. In addition, Churchill had a Rothschild bank account, the preserve of friends and associates, and collaborated with the Rothschilds in the formation of Shell BP and the British Newfoundland Development Corporation. Even his private secretary, John Jock Colville, belonged to Rothschild circles, the Colvilles being friends of the Rothschilds, while Jock's brother David was a director of Rothschild outfits like Rio Tinto. Sir Strakosch was a string puller and collaborator of British gold mining and banking interests, notably the Rothschilds. He was a very close associate and probably member of the Milner Group, being an old friend of Milnerite Leo Amery from the Boer War and serving as financial advisor to the Bank of England and General Smuts' South African government. He played a prominent role in various Bank of England Milner Group projects like the Anglo-Austrian Bank, the League of Nations Financial Committee, and the Reparations Commission, and was one of Churchill's financial supporters. Churchill's close friend, Baruch, an international financier and presidential political advisor, was another notorious plutocrat. He held mining interests in Africa, had been involved in supplying the Anglo-American war effort in World War I, together with the Rothschild and Morgan groups, and had a long history of involvement in Milner Fabian internationalist projects like the League of Nations. Last but not least, Churchill was the grandson, through his American mother, of Wall Street financier and New York Times shareholder Leonard Walter Jerome, the King of Wall Street, who was a close associate of Vanderbilt Morgan interests. It will be recalled that railway magnate William K. Vanderbilt and J.P. Morgan founded the Metropolitan Club of New York, which later spawned the Council on Foreign Relations. Just how close Churchill and his family were to the Anglo-American establishment is further demonstrated by the fact that Churchill's first cousin, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, married Vanderbilt heiress Consuelo, daughter of W.K. Vanderbilt himself. Similarly, Churchill's daughter, Diana, married Abe Bailey's son, John Milner. David Carradine unhelpfully asserts that Churchill's dependence on various financiers does not mean that he was the creature of an international conspiracy of moneylenders. But it does not follow that no conspiracy existed or that Churchill had nothing to do with it. The evidence shows that there was a conspiracy of liberal imperialists with very close links to international finance. Whether the prime movers were the imperialists or the financiers is irrelevant, not least because the imperialists and the financiers often were the same persons. The crucial point is that a conspiracy existed and that Churchill was very close to the central core of this conspiracy. In particular, as a regular guest at Cliveden, Churchill belonged to the Cliveden set, which was another name for the Milner Group. On Quigley's model, he may safely be regarded as belonging, at the very least, to the outer circle of the Milner Group's association of helpers. Carradine also asserts that in the 1930s, Churchill became a reactionary class warrior and a paranoid aristocrat. But the fact is that Churchill renounced the ducal title for the sake of his son's career in the Commons, which shows that as far as he was concerned, tradition took a back seat in the face of other interests. Nor can the ideas he shared with the Milner Group and the Fabians, such as international organization and state-controlled planning, be described as reactionary. Moreover, it was under Churchill's 1940 to 1945 regime that the Socialist Fabian Society and its Labour Front took over Britain. The fact is that Churchill was close to the Milner Group not only socially and politically, but also ideologically. The special relationship between Britain and America, the division of the world into regional economic blocks, control of the world's economies, reintroduction of the gold standard, world organization, etc., were central planks in Milnerite and Churchillian ideology alike. Indeed, it is difficult to find any difference between the ideology of Churchill and that of the Milner Group and the financial interests behind it. Above all, Churchill was a long-standing acquaintance of Europeanist schemers like Rettinger and Salter and had been an advocate of a united Europe at least since 1930. His idea of Franco-German cooperation dated from about the same time or earlier. His idea of Franco-German cooperation dated from about the same time or earlier. As already noted, another prominent supporter of a united Europe was Labour's Fabian Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin, who in January 1948 called for a Western European Union. In the Daily Mail, no less. Given the British leaders themselves called for some form of united Europe or other, and even specified that it had to be based on Franco-German cooperation, it makes little sense to point the finger of accusation at the French or the Germans unless there is an intention to deflect attention from the real culprits. The US policy of making German economy geared to a world system should alert us to the fact that this was part of the Anglo-American New World Order which, far from being a German creation, was in fact designed to suppress Germany, this being the express objective of the League of Nations and its successor, the United Nations, created by the same groups. As admitted by Monnet's secretary Duchesne and others, the whole raison d'etre of the European coal and steel community and its successor, the European Community, was to contain German dominance of Europe. Expecting Europe's largest nation and strongest economy not to dominate Europe was, of course, as unrealistic as expecting the British Empire with its global network of Royal Navy bases not to dominate the seas. Yet containing Germany's political and economic influence had been the policy of European powers since the time of Napoleon I. The historian of the European Union, John Gillingham, admits that EU membership has been worthwhile for Germany only insofar as it has enabled it to, quote, overcome the legacy of the past. But while this may have been the effect of Germany's membership, it is by no means certain that it was its cause. Gillingham also admits that the economic case for British EU membership is, quote, probably the weakest of any member state. So why has the establishment insisted on Britain remaining in the EU, as clearly seen during and after the 2016 referendum? According to Gillingham, there is a strong security rationale. Allegedly, British withdrawal from the EU could open the door to single power domination of the continent. Security aside, the truth of the matter is that if British membership is of no economic benefit to either Germany or Britain, then it can only be of benefit to certain private interests. The interests involved are revealed by Gillingham himself, who quotes a prominent Wall Street banker to the effect that the creation of a single European financial market will turn Europe into, quote, a killing ground for us. Indeed, by 1996, big Wall Street banks like Goldman Sachs & Co., JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley were involved in 2/3 of all European mergers and acquisitions. Among other interests who were able to expand their operations was Rothschild Europe. That reference for that is a New York Times article. This inevitably brings us back to the international clique behind the scheme. Chatham House's sister organisation, the Council on Foreign Relations, of which John McCloy was a prominent member, exerted a powerful influence on the White House. As pointed out by Rose Martin, President Roosevelt was a faithful disciple of Fabian LSE professor Harold Lasky, and his views coincided with those of the Fabian International Bureau. Roosevelt was also described by his son-in-law as a mouthpiece for CFR interests, and the same may be said of his successors from Harry Truman to Barack Obama. In fact, several US presidents have been CFR members. More importantly, the CFR controlled the US State Department and its Advisory Committee on Post-War Foreign Policy, as well as the CFR-designed $13 billion Marshall Aid Fund being poured into Europe, with CFR member Avril Harriman in charge. The CFR even controlled the US Treasury Department either directly or through proxy organizations. Among US Treasury secretaries whose signature appears on US dollar notes between 1934 and 1968, we find Henry Morgenthau Jr., John W. Snyder, George M. Humphrey, Robert B. Anderson, Douglas Dillon, and Henry H. Fowler. The first and the last two were CFR members, and the remaining three were leading members of the CFR Associated Business Advisory Council. In particular, the CFR also controlled US government funding for the European movement, as well as the American Committee on United Europe, through which the funding was channeled. The American Committee on United Europe was formed in 1949 by Chatham House CFR elements and has close links to the intelligence services controlled by them. Its chairman was William Donovan, former head of the MI6-created U.S. Office of Strategic Services. CFR co-founder and later CIA Director Alan Dulles was appointed ACUE Vice Chairman. CFR Director George S. Franklin was ACUE Secretary. General Clay, the U.S. military governor of Germany, was on the ACUE Board of Directors. Especially significant is the fact that the unification of Europe was not only official US policy, but a precondition of Marshall Plan aid stipulated by the US Congress. Meanwhile, in Europe, Monnet was busy with his domestic modernization plan for the French economy and, according to his own memoirs, did not become involved in the European project until early 1950. Moreover, it was Washington and London who admittedly put pressure on Paris to come up with a new policy vis-à-vis Germany. Monnet worked on his Franco-German project in complete secrecy, apparently even without the knowledge of the French government, which in itself makes the whole project highly suspect. While details on Monnet's secret work are understandably not easy to come by, it is clear that he belonged to the usual international Milner Fabian circles behind the European project, and that he surrounded himself with the same elements and their associates. Already during the war, Monnet had instigated the creation of the Combined Production and Resources Board, a committee coordinating British and American war production. He was able to establish an extensive network of important international contacts as an investment banker and League of Nations official. In addition, Monnet was an admirer of Keynes's Fabian economic theories that were in vogue at the time, especially in America, and was particularly attracted to the idea of giant industrial complexes. Unsurprisingly, already in 1943, he proposed to de Gaulle a European state based on industrial areas in Germany, Luxembourg, and other countries. As de Gaulle's plan commissioner, Monnet had disciples of American Keynesianism like Etienne Hirsch and Pierre Uri on his planning board. Indeed, like Marx, Lenin, and other leading socialists, his whole team was fascinated by America's mass-producing industrial giants, and the same hand-picked elements were again in Monnet's team in 1950. Unsurprisingly, the team believed that the very existence of trusts imposed political federalism on Europe. Paul Reuter, another key collaborator, wrote that the law of historic and social evolution must lead to the enlargement of political structures to the size of the trusts and not to the shrinking of the trusts to the size of states. That's a confusing quote there. It was thought in these circles that as European states were quite small compared to America and Russia, Europe needed to centralize its economic structure on a Europe-wide basis. In short, the whole idea was based on centralization, i.e. monopolization of economy, and in particular of heavy industry, hence the coal and steel community. Both monopolistic capitalism, as promoted by the international financiers, and state-planned economy, as promoted by socialism, converged in Monnet's Schuman plan. The objectives of the Monnet plan for France clearly coincided with those of the Monnet plan for Europe. Both the plan for France and the first drafts of the Schuman plan were based on merging French and German coal and steel production under an international authority. The very concept of a high authority was, of course, American, and clearly exposes Anglo-American influence. It is not for nothing that the high authority's first president was Monnet himself. While serving as head of the French Supply Council in 1945, Monnet was assisted by Americans like CFR member George W. Bull, who secretly drafted Monnet's documents at the latter's Paris office. Bull, who is said to have represented certain commercial interests, became Under-Secretary of State for Economic Affairs under J.F. Kennedy, who was a CFR member, and later partner and chairman of Lehman Brothers. Etienne Hirsch, the son of prominent banker Richard Hirsch and a socialist, was a former engineer with the chemical company Kuhlmann and served as president of the French Supply Council in London during the war. Both Hirsch and Pierre Uri, a lawyer turned economist, became members of the left-wing Jean Moulin Club, named after the radical socialist resistance leader, who also had close links to London. Monnet became president of the European Coal and Steel Community's High Authority, and Hirsch became president of the European Atomic Energy Community. In 1967, the ECSC and the EAEC merged to form the European Community. Uri remained a prominent behind-the-scenes figure, as well as becoming Director of Studies at the Atlantic Institute for International Affairs. The Atlantic Institute for International Affairs was run by the 3rd Earl of Cromer, former Managing Director of Baring Brothers, Executive Director of the IMF, IBRD, aka World Bank, International Finance Corporation, Governor of the Bank of England, and a relative of Daily Mail owners, the Harmsworths, and Giscard d'Estaing. So that was the 3rd Earl of Cromer, right? The Atlantic Institute for International Affairs also had John J. McCloy as honorary chairman and was funded by the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation. Among Monnet's private secretaries were Francois Duchesne, a London-born LSE graduate who became director of the London-based International Institute for Strategic Studies, a Ford Rockefeller-funded organisation, and George Berthoin. George Berthoin, I have no idea how to say that one. I'll go with Berthoin, who became Deputy Chief Representative of the ECSC and later EEC High Representative in London. Berthoin and Duchesne also became chairman of the European section of the Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission, as well as prominent Bilderberg members. Gee, this is exhausting. It must be noted at this point that Monnet, Hirsch, and many other key figures in the European movement had all been involved in the Allied war effort, and particularly in the anti-German resistance orchestrated by the Anglo-American establishment. Apart from London, French North Africa had been a centre of the British-led resistance movement. North Africa had also been the seat on the US Joint Intelligence Collection Agency, a prominent member of which was David Rockefeller, who, while running his own private intelligence network, was looking after Standard Oil interests in the region. Similarly, the Rockefellers' European counterparts, the Rothschild Group, who had close links to the British intelligence services, played key roles in the resistance movement while looking after their own oil interests. In 1939, Rothschild-controlled Shell set up the Petroleum Board, which controlled all of Britain's importations, storage and distribution of oil, and was chaired by Shell director Andrew Agnew, a leading member of the Oil Control Board, a subcommittee of the War Cabinet. As pointed out by Aldrich, the European movement was instigated by the international network created by the Anglo-American intelligence and resistance community during World War II. The German anti-Nazi resistance was no exception. Its leaders, including Helmuth von Moltke and Adam von Trotzu-Solz, were close friends of Lionel Curtis and members of the Milner Group. Like their British and French counterparts, they aimed to create a European federation after the war. To the same community also belonged the international financiers like David Astor and David Rockefeller, who funded the movement. It follows that the Anglo-American war effort, the intelligence and resistance activities connected with it, and the drive for the federation or unification of Europe after the war were all part of the same overarching plan devised, implemented, and supported by the same groups. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to have a little pause there, take a sip, and have a little break. It's really, like, I say exhausting, but it's a lot of names, people that I don't know. Obviously, we've got the groups that we do know, we are aware of, but then there's others. It's amazing how many institutes and organizations and leagues and groups that these people create, and it's part of their chameleon-like shape-shifting nature to always be blending in and changing and rebranding. I always describe it as rebranding themselves, because it's the same people, the same plan, the same motivations, the same lust for power and control and wealth and influence. But they have to rebrand themselves to stop people cottoning on to what it is that they're doing and what they're really going after, right? So I really want to learn, after reading that section, more about Churchill's involvement with the Rothschilds. And I want to scour the index on some of these Rothschild books up here. Like this section is Rothschild in the middle here. Find out if there's any links there or any references there to Churchill and what those books say about that relationship. Because Churchill is hailed as this quintessential British hero, but has a real checkered past. And I don't have any good sources or books on him. But I've just heard, for example, what's the historian called? He's got the website Revisionist History. It's a really ugly website, but it's a very, very good website as well. Michael Hoffman. I think it's Michael Hoffman. Yeah, Michael Hoffman has a podcast called Revisionist History, and in that there's a really great episode on Churchill. and the kind of just the true nature of his character and the horrific crimes he was involved in. So for me, it's not hard at all to believe that he was involved in the Milner Fabian circles of influence. But it's quite startling to see that the last 100 years have had much more a much more prominent guiding hand than we are led to believe. You know, ESP just popped up on Odyssey. Good evening. Yeah, chameleon, shape-shifting nature. Yeah, that's what they're like, right? Rebranding themselves, giving themselves names, hiding behind titles, and yet underneath they're still evil psychopaths, right? Oh, I just totally lost my train of thought there. What was I just saying? Hang on, let me take a swig and I'll try and recapture that thought. Yeah, it's the guiding hand. The last 100 years we're given a narrative, the authorized version, about how all these things just happened. They came up organically. They're the result of too much nationalism. In fact, when I looked at the European Union's page on Wikipedia earlier tonight, it did blame too much nationalism. You know, it said there was too much nationalism, which led to the world wars, and the outcome of the wars and the horrors that took place therein led to this idea and this motivation to form the European Union, right? So it's the problem is too much nationalism, as usual. It's those far right nationalists, Christians as well, usually, for good measure. But the last 100 years has had way more of a hidden hand, and you know it's called the hidden hand because for the most part it's hidden. It's only historians like Quigley who are allowed to see the private papers of the Council on Foreign Relations, or the historians such as Ioan Ratiu, who are gathering these books and buying them up and reading them and putting together, filling in the blanks, or Rose L. Martin. You know, these people are few and far between, and it takes a while to dig through the available resources on these topics and these people and these events until you come to these authors such as Ratiu, and Anthony Sutton is another good example. Quigley. You know, you could probably spend your whole life reading about these events and never stumble upon those three historians that I just listed, because there's such a overwhelmingly huge volume of information has been put out there, whether it's documentaries, TV series, whether it's films or movies or books, magazines, where it might be curriculum taught in secondary schools or universities. You know, there's an incredible amount of noise out there, and it can be hard to find the signal. But when you do tune into the signal, that is when you start to see these networks, and you start to see the picture of the hidden hand. And actually, that just reminds me that the Richard Aldrich book that I have, I'm pretty sure, is called The Hidden Hand. And I was just saying, like, I know the author, Richard Aldrich. I just want to double check that because I know it's not on the shelf behind me. It's still in one of the boxes. I'll share it for you guys if it shows up. Yeah, that's it. I knew the guy's name. I just couldn't remember what book it was that I had of his. But yeah, you can look up, I think, here you can see Richard James Aldrich is the writer, and the book is The Hidden hand, Britain, America, and Cold War Secret Intelligence. You can drop £90 on the paperback if you like, or you can just pay £18 for a used hardback copy. Quite curious that the paperback is so expensive. Look, £80 for the copy of the paperback. But there is a used paperback for £20 available. I don't know how these prices get calculated. It makes no sense to me at all. But if we go to Richard J. Aldrich, check out all books, we can look at, let's go for the hardback. What's he got? He's got a history of the GCHQ. I don't think I have that one. No, I don't. So he's got a history of GCHQ. He's got spies, secret intelligence, and British prime ministers. The black door, sorry, not the back door. That's a totally different thing, isn't it? He's got Crown, Cloak, and Dagger. The British monarchy and secret intelligence. I bet that's a good one. I love the cover on that as well. Spying on the world. Declassified documents of the Joint Intelligence Committee. There's the Hidden Hand. That's the book I've got. The Key to the South, and then this one down here, Clandestine Cold War in Asia, £137. So I'm telling you, books are a good investment. Start stocking up, start buying them. You never know where the price is going to go. But not that I think you should sell them. I think you should read them and teach other people about the contents and what's in them. That would be the better outcome. Got a few more comments rolling in. Our Murray 1 over on Rumble says, shite, I'm late. Well, better late than never, as they say, and you can always watch the replay after the fact. So it's very good to have you here. Happy New Year to you. Lovely to see you. Then we got a few more people pop into the YouTube chat as well. We got Jeanette Lilly saying Happy New Year, everyone. And we got PW saying, I hope you all have health and happy to 2025. Celine Lyon as well is here and saying, bit behind, but with you in spirit. Catching up on the preamble ramble. Awesome. Yeah, great to have you all here. Thank you very much. Frank Lennon is giving us some good commentary here about the early EU flag comprising 3 pentagrams. The pentagram equates to the star Sirius and has lineage way back to ancient Egypt. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Egyptian link is so fascinating to me. And I think Sean Cross on the Gire channel does a lot of good work on that. Just identifying the symbols, the symbolism. You know, why is there obelisks in all the major cities in Europe, for example? Pretty wild, but there are. Or, you know, even America, you know, in Washington, there's the huge obelisk opposite there. Is it the Capitol building? So, very strange. Frank Lennon says, Germany was crushed in World War II and smothered thereafter in the post-war maneuverings of the so-called Allies. Yeah, that's an area of history I'm very keen to learn more about and read more about. I have a few books over here. The Myth of German Villainy is one of them. I have another one called After the Reich, and then another one called, I think it's just called Other Losses. It's here. Little paperback I got from a listener actually who had a load of books, who inherited a load of books and allowed me to take my pick and add some of them to my library, which I was extremely grateful for. Thank you, Deborah, if you're listening. This is an investigation into the mass deaths of German prisoners of war after World War II. So that's one that I definitely want to read sometime because, yeah, they were absolutely shafted and abused, neglected, harmed, and supposedly we're the good guys, and yet committed some disgusting atrocities. I say we, not us here on the call tonight. I mean, the Allies, as you say there, Frank. Yeah, great comments. Thank you very much. Page 253, Frank is saying, it's all just one big incestuous club, isn't it? Yes, it is indeed. And we got Hasdak as well over on Rumble popping in saying Happy New Year. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you. Hope you're doing well. And you've got some nice activities lined up for the rest of the evening. I'm just going to have a look ahead, see how much further we got in this section. I might wrap tonight's reading up a little bit, a bit earlier. Okay, we got about 3 pages to get through till the next section. I think we're going to polish that off and then we'll close it out for tonight. But this is what you said is about what Frank just said about it being an incestuous club, we're really seeing that now. We're really seeing all the links. Like Ioan Ratiu's pulling together so many threads, whether it's the financiers, the monopoly capitalists, the socialists. We're getting that big picture, both sides of the aisle. You know, he's exposing the dialectic and how the two sides of the dialectic are the same, are under the same influence and control, and that the hidden hand behind the scenes influencers, let's say, not to use the internet TikTok sense of the term influencers, but the power players who are unelected, who are born into wealth, influence, power, who are groomed for the role, whose skills are recruited, maybe they're blackmailed into it. There's a whole host of different ways you can end up in that clique of off-stage hidden hand influencers and puppeteers, let's say. But one thing's for sure is you don't get elected into those positions, right? The Kissingers, the Brzezinskis, the long-term diplomats, the bureaucrats who are always there. Very few of them get elected. Many more of them are born into it and inherit titles and inherit these positions and carry out agendas and pursue goals that are very at odds with the rest of us, you know, little people here on the ground, suffering under this parasitic minority of psychopaths. All right, so I got to wrap this up because I just ran out of beer. But I think, as I said, we got about, not too much further to go. So let's go back over to the book cam. Here we are. So we just finished this section. We'll call it a night. As regards the Schuman Plan, an interesting incident recorded by US and French documents illustrates the true sequence of events. During a foreign ministerial meeting in September 1949, US Secretary of State Dean Acheson put a gun to French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman's head and told him to come up with a common policy for West Germany at the next meeting. Schuman obediently produced his plan in May 1950. Acheson hailed the plan as progressive. As we have just seen, of course, the plan was conceived by Arthur Salter's friend and collaborator Monnet, to whom Schuman had turned for help. Incidentally, Monnet was also an old business acquaintance of Acheson. The Germans were then pressured to accept the plan by various personal friends of the Salter-Monnet-Churchill axis like McCloy, who urged French and German leaders to make compromises and cooperate closer in an Anglo-American sense. As for Acheson, he was not only a Marshall Plan co-architect, but he had served as Under-Secretary of State under Baruch man Burns. Unsurprisingly, Baruch's old friend Churchill defended Schuman in the Commons debate in June, claiming that on either side of the Atlantic, interdependence is part of our faith and the means of our salvation. Labour's Fabian Prime Minister Attlee, too, hailed the plan as a notable contribution, declaring that his government welcomed this French initiative. In a private memorandum to Cabinet Secretary Sir Norman Brooke, Attlee later wrote that, quote, the views expressed by Monsieur Schuman are generally in line with our own. As observed by Pascal Fontaine, former director of the Private Office of the European Parliament, President, and one of Monnet's close assistants, it could be said that the Schuman Plan was the result of a conspiracy. In particular, Fontaine points out the utmost discretion, i.e. secrecy, with which the project was handled, was designed, quote, to obviate inevitable caveats and counter-proposals which would have diluted its revolutionary approach and removed the element of surprise. Indeed, even the idea of a coal organization can be traced to a memorandum drafted in August 1944 by the CFR-controlled US Embassy in London, which resulted in the establishment of the European Coal Organisation in London in May 1945. This in turn had its roots in the solid fuels section of the London-based Supreme Headquarters Allied Europe Forces, headed by Churchill's collaborator General Eisenhower, which aimed to control coal mines captured from the Germans. On the available evidence, there can be little doubt that the plan originated in Anglo-American circles, was passed on to Monnet, and then sold to the French and other unsuspecting Europeans as the Schuman Declaration, leading to the establishment of the European coal and steel community. The deception was complete. It is also a telling illustration of the Milner Fabian tactics by which these groups impose their agendas on the world. Another sense in which the project may be said to have been the result of a conspiracy is in its failure to disclose from the start that the Schuman Plan really aimed to create a European federation. The involvement of international financial interests in international government projects like the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the European Union exposes the fundamental flaw of modern parliamentary government. There is no mechanism by which democratically elected political parties can be prevented, once in office, from pursuing the agendas of anti-democratic international cliques bent on world domination. I'm going to read that bit again, actually, because I think that is a very critical sort of like, okay, that sums it all up. Just to do this whole paragraph. The involvement of international financial interests in international government projects like the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the European Union exposes the fundamental flaw of modern parliamentary government. Namely, there is no mechanism by which democratically elected political parties can be prevented, once in office, from pursuing the agendas of anti-democratic international cliques bent on world domination. So that's a humdinger of a quote. I'm just going to stick a little blue thing in here so we can find that again later. He says, continuing, if true democracy and freedom are to be restored, two key lessons must be drawn from recent British and world history. First, that political leaders can no longer be trusted, and second, that from the early 1900s, Britain and much of the world have been controlled by two allied groups, the Fabian Society and the Milner Group, the former operating in Labour circles and the latter in liberal circles, while both increasingly also infiltrated and dominated the Conservatives. Yeah, wow. Continuing. It is, of course, legitimate to ask why the real movers and shakers behind the European Union and similar projects are not found in history books. Apart from the obvious fact that the groups responsible operated behind the scenes, the answer is that, as pointed out by Professor Quigley, they had almost complete control over the publication of documents relating to their actions and were able to completely monopolize the writing and teaching of history. Boom. Written by the victors, isn't it, history? Indeed, these groups dominated government departments like the Ministry of Information, which was responsible for publicity and news and press censorship during the war, universities through chancellorships. Milner himself was Chancellor of Oxford University, professorships, scholarships, and funding by the Rhodes Trust, the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations, etc., and owned, controlled, or dominated the media, the BBC, the Times, the Observer, the Economist, the Daily Express, etc. And the reference for that is Quigley's book, pages 138, 194, 197, and 303. So, yes, I agree with you, Frank. This page is certainly dynamite. The same groups also owned, controlled, or dominated publishing houses and were able to suppress the publication of incriminating materials. In Britain, Churchill alone counted several publishers and press barons among his close friends, and publications that were unflattering or inconvenient to Churchill or his family were often suppressed. Early biographies of Lord Randolph Churchill suppress the fact that he died owing a large sum to the Rothschilds, and that's as reported by Ferguson again. Churchill's own official and supposedly exhaustive 8-volume biography by Martin Gilbert does not mention his role in the European movement nor his approval of British membership of the EEC. Even important reference works were controlled by Milner Fabian interests. To give a few examples, the owners-editors of the National Review for the period under discussion, 1932 to 1960, were successively Milnerites. Lady Milner, the first Lord Altrincham and his son, the second Lord Altrincham, John Grigg. The editor of the Annual Register between 1947 and 1972, again a whole generation, was Lionel Curtis's trusted Milnerite lieutenant and Chatham House secretary, Iverson S. Macadam. Curtis's other friend, John de Monis Johnson, was printer to the Oxford University Press and responsible, apart from publishing Curtis' own books, for printing the Oxford English Dictionary. So they're also controlling the dictionaries, which means a control of words and language, which means, and you use words and language to do your thinking, right? So if you're controlling the words, you're controlling the language, that means you're controlling people's thinking, which is mind control and thought control, isn't it? Only this is a rudimentary version of it because this was before the internet, before smartphones, before the addictive blue light screen technology and the gamification of websites and social media and apps and all that other stuff, right? So, as a former journalist and writer in the pay of certain money interests, Churchill knew all about manipulation of information and public opinion. For example, he wrote, quote, "A modern dictator with the resources of science at his disposal can easily lead the public on from day to day, destroying all persistency of thought and aim, so that memory is blurred by the multiplicity of daily news and judgment baffled by its perversion." It's a very similar kind of idea of what we covered and read a lot of in Brave New World Revisited. I know I keep showing that. I'm trying to whet people's appetite for that discussion with Melissa because I thought it was a really good one. Continuing. As pointed out by Cannadine, those who knew Churchill detected a dictatorial streak in his personality. Moreover, he was an admirer of Italian dictator Mussolini and during the war enjoyed almost dictatorial powers himself. Certainly, the methods of the Milner Group, with whom Churchill chose to closely associate himself, came very close to his description of a modern dictatorship. Details of Milnerite aims and methods were later disclosed by the American historian Carroll Quigley. It was in America, too, that details of the Anglo-American connection began to come to light, and even there only with difficulty. An early cause célèbre, an early cause for celebration was The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, which exposed links between Wall Street and City of London financial interests. Its author, Eustace Mullins, was forced to publish his research in the 1950s using private funds. In Germany, in the 1960s, the work was even seized and burned by the authorities, on orders from the US High Commissioner James B. Conant. Mullins himself was blacklisted by the FBI. Professor Conant was a former president and radical reformer of Harvard University, member of the Business Education Committee of the CFR-created Committee for Economic Development, and member of President Eisenhower's Commission on National Goals. He was also an influential member of the Milner Fabian Council on Foreign Relations, and in the 1940s had received an honorary degree from Chancellor of Bristol University Winston Churchill. Needless to say, information on British policy, both foreign and domestic, continues to be systematically suppressed, and history in particular is interpreted according to the agendas of the ruling elites. While historical evidence which does not fit the dominant paradigm is ignored or suppressed, as illustrated by the FO's withholding of over 1 million historic documents in breach of the Public Records Act. However, no amount of suppression can cover up the fact that internationalist projects from the Commonwealth to the League of Nations to the UN were products of British Empire politics. And this is the key to the correct understanding of events related to the European Union. And this is the end of tonight's reading of the Milner Fabian conspiracy, how an international elite is taking over and destroying Europe, America, and the world. Well, another good chapter. Very heavy on names and organizations and titles and dates and connections. A lot of names, but it's what you get when you read well-researched, well-documented, thoroughly written history. That's actually what the Anglo-American establishment by Quigley reads like. It's a lot of names and dates, and it's kind of dry and quite boring. But yeah, top quote there. I think everyone was pretty impressed with page 256. Over on Rumble, we've got Heidi saying, great repeat paragraph there. Can you share that in Telegram? Yes, I will. I'll share that whole page. Hasdak says, were most of these people Jewish, backed by Jewish money? I don't think the answer is yes to either of those questions. I mean, I don't even know how to define Jewish. Is it a nation? Is it a religion? So I'm not qualified to answer that question, I'm afraid. How's everybody doing over on YouTube? Jeanette Lilly agrees that Sean Ross's channel is good. Says she watches him a lot. Yeah, I like him. I like his work. Trevor McDonald's here. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. Thank you very much, Trevor. Right back at you. Frank Lennon says, May 1950, the plan. Little did we know that we were living under the gun to the plan all these years. Bitterly, I might add. Yeah. PW says, Nick, could you do a top 3 books for 2024? Cheers. Only 3? If I had to pick a top 3 based on our reading on this channel, I think if I had to pick top 3 out of the ones we've read on the channel, it's going to be fairly easy to do. Actually, it's going to be Fabian Freeway. Fabian Freeway is going to be one of those. Absolute must read, very important to read. Then I would definitely put Milner Fabian Conspiracy in there as well, even though we haven't finished it yet. But, I mean, come on. So those 2 would be in there. And the third one, that's where it gets a little bit harder. The third one would be trickier to pick. I'd probably go for the Charles Galton Darwin Next Million Years, though. What have I got to pick from? Yeah, it would be a tie. It would be a tie between. No, yeah, I'd probably go for Lusitania. Where's Lusitania? Lusitania, I think, would be my third. If it's just books we've read on the channel, of which we've done 10 now, those 3 would be the ones that I'd say real standout. They're all good. You know, they're all valuable, they're all important, and they all have very key pieces of the puzzle. But Fabian Freeway and Milner Fabian, they go together like chocolate and peanut butter, you know. They go together so well and really accelerate your understanding of things. But then there's the G. Edward Griffin one as well, Fearful Master. It's really hard to choose if it's going to be Fearful Master or Lusitania. You know, I might actually, yeah, I'll revise that. I'll put Fearful Master in there. Okay, so they're going to be the top 3. Fabian Freeway, High Road Socialism, Milner Fabian Conspiracy, and The Fearful Master by G. Edward Griffin. They're the ones that I think read together and combined give a better, more not complete, but a more accurate, bigger picture of the hidden hand and how it works, and the occulted history and the true nature some of the household names of the UN and the EU and the Labour Party. I think these three together form a fairly powerful education in how the world really works. And then as a bonus book, as a runner-up, I would recommend the Lusitania. It's got more of a narrative to it. It's heartbreaking. It's hard reading, but it's kind of necessary to give you a view on the lengths that this parasitical class of people will go to allow things to happen to get what they want. They don't think anything of allowing people to die, of sending people off to murder each other. That's what wars are. They're just huge, disgusting, blatant, tragic, horrific human sacrifice rituals. There's no other way to say it, really. There's nothing heroic. I mean, I'm sure there were individual instances and acts of heroism in there, but there's nothing heroic about going and trying to murder other people and each other. It's really, and it's never done it never helps. It always results in the increase in slavery and the marching on of this agenda to bring us all into a scientifically controlled system of governance, right? So Hasdak says all wars are bankers' wars. Very wise, very well said. Yes, follow the money. Where does the money come from? Heidi says Lusitania was fabulous to see how the news is made and written. Oh, thank you. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying thank you. I didn't write the book. Colin Simpson wrote it, but it is a fabulous book for that reason. I totally agree. Armory One says Hebrew Christian is just a head fake. Satan is what they're into. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I like Mark Passio's description of Satanism, and I think that sums it up very nicely because it shows you what we are being indoctrinated into. That's why moral relativism being the top criticism of the UN on Wikipedia was surprising to me, because a key tenet of Satanism is moral relativism. Another one is solipsism. And these are the aspects of worldview that many of us are indoctrinated into through the schooling, through the scientific materialist paradigm, through the Darwinian evolution, Big Bang Theory, a totally materialistic concept of reality that negates soul, spirit, and the beyond, the things that we can't sense with our five senses, the world of spirits, demons, angels, God, all that kind of thing is left out largely. And that leads many of us to end up in a sort of relativistic, solipsistic frame of mind, which I think is what these crazy psychopathic parasites are. That's how they think. That's how they view the world, right? ESP says 11.9 was a good example of that. And if you're wondering what 11.9 is, just reverse the numbers around. You'll figure it out. So Trevor McDonald says, Brave New World Revisited was the one which really opened my eyes when I was younger. I'm not surprised. I actually want to do that one in full on the channel, just to get it on the record. It's a fantastic companion to The Next Million Years by Charles Galton Darwin, but I would say better. More revealing, more full of truthful nuggets that really show you that Aldous Huxley knew the way things really worked. And I think we should read that one in full on the channel. But until we get around to doing that, you'll have to wait for our conversation with published on Thursday, this Thursday coming, which is the 2nd, 2 days from now. Jeanette Lilly says, the Read You Need channel has all Eustace Mullin's work. Cool. Thank you for that. I didn't know about that. Never heard of the Read You Need. Is that YouTube? The Read You Need. Doesn't look like it is YouTube unless it's a bit further down in the search. If anyone has a link to the Read You Need channel or knows, I'll look that up and grab some of those. Frank says, well done. Thank you, sir. I'm glad you enjoyed it. PW is off for the night saying, enjoy your evening. See you soon. Thank you very much for hanging out. Frank says, Ed Griffin. Yeah, top 3 books. It's got to be Ed Griffin, hasn't it? What a book. Tiny little paperback. But this one will forever change your view on the UN, just as the Milner Fabian book does. David James Flood is here and says, Nick, have you got Between Two Ages and the Grand Chessboard by Brzezinski? I've got the Grand Chessboard. Between Two Ages is pretty expensive. And I haven't managed to find a copy that I wanted to pull the trigger on yet. But I'm keeping my eye out, and eventually, hopefully, we'll grab a copy. New World Order, Sean Stone. I do have that. In fact, I did a book review of it on the channel. That's a really good one as well, everybody. And this copy is, I've shown it on here before, but it is signed. Not to me, to Brian. And then Brian decided he didn't want to keep it anymore, and he sold it to me. So thank you, Brian. But yeah, this is a really good one, and I could really benefit from going back and reading this one again, because when I read it, I was nowhere near as well versed in all these topics and the people and the players and the timelines and everything. So I could definitely go back and give that another read, because it's pretty academic, but extremely well written. It has a foreword by Richard Grove, none other than. So yeah, I really recommend that one as well. And it took me a while to find a copy of that one to buy. I was getting really paranoid. I was like, oh, they've deleted it from the internet. I can't find it anywhere, but it's actually not that hard to find. Heidi says, my children's encyclopedia convinced me that I was a blob of chemical reactions. Yeah, that's it. You're just a blob of chemical reactions. Everything's chaotic and random. There's no plan to anything. It's all here by chance. And it's just a big accident. It's just a big cosmic accident, in other words. Therefore, nothing means anything. Therefore, nothing you do has any meaning or purpose. Therefore, why do anything? You might as well just sit on your backside, play computer games, smoke weed all day, and, just do that till you die. Which I don't think is a message that we want to be spreading or sending out to people. So please don't clip that and say, oh, look at this terrible guy saying all these horrible things. Take it out of context. Cool. Okay, The Read You Need is a great channel, says Frank as well. So I'm going to have to find it. I appreciate that recommendation. Hasdak says, I live in the Matrix. Well, you just need to take the red pill, right? You know that, don't you? Just take the red pill. If you don't have a red pill, then you try an M&M or maybe some other sort of, I think M&M, Skittles. They've got red ones, I think. Cool. All right, everybody, I think I'm going to leave it there and wrap it up for tonight. This New Year's Eve, the last live stream of the year. But, a year and a half ago, I didn't do any live streaming. It wasn't even a thing that I'd considered ever thinking of doing. And then one day I saw that little live stream go live button here on the OBS program, and I thought, I wonder if that works. And then here we are, over a year later, with a nice little community of researchers and book enthusiasts, and I am deeply grateful to each and every one of you who's shown any kind of support in any way, big or small, over the last year. It's incredible. I'm very excited to see where we go next year, because I've got a lot of books to read. And so we got plenty of material. So if you keep showing up and participating, I will also do the same. And let's continue to satisfy our curiosity and to have an edifying learning experience from some of the finest researchers, historians, and writers that have been occulted, that have been left off the university curriculums. It's quite funny, actually. I've been buying, I buy secondhand books quite regularly, and I got one that came through the other day. Where is it? I think it's this one. Yeah, I got one. I keep getting, not that I keep getting, but I got this one through the other day, and it's got on here on the front. It's the House of Commons Library. This is a book in pursuit of world order, and it has like a little stamp on the inside. Saying it's from the House of Commons. So the House of Commons Library here in the UK is cleaning house. That was it. Yeah. I got 2 books from the House of Commons Library recently. This one as well, another Mark Curtis book. He's a Royal Institute for International Affairs fellow. House of Commons Library. They're getting rid, right? House of Commons Library. So it looks to me like they're getting rid of this book they got rid of here. He was a CFR guy, Richard Gardner. He wrote in Foreign Affairs, The Hard Road to World Order. They're purging the House of Commons Library of things that tell the truth. And this is Mark Curtis, Anglo-American Power and World Order. Maybe they're just getting rid of books that have world order in the title, right? So we got a lot to read is my point. Plenty more to come. And if people show up, support, get involved, then it makes it all much more valuable and easier. So if you feel inclined to do that, don't forget, you can always go over to allmylinks.com/HaysReviews. You can join the free community and we can hang out more and get to know each other. You can listen to my album of original songs on SoundCloud. You can watch on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey and Entropy. You can join the Instagram, Twixter, and Telegram pages to stay in touch. You can email me. Always great to hear from people, whether you got a book recommendation or a question, or just want to vent. Maybe you just want to tell me how crazy it is that we've got these parasites on our backs and it's frustrating as hell. Get in touch anytime. We got PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, Subscribestar, Streamlabs, and Entropy. All ways to send over a few pennies if you are able. It's very much appreciated. And you can also send crypto if you like that and you're into that sort of thing too. That would be awesome. So I think that's going to be about it for tonight, everybody. I've got a few comments on YouTube. People saying Happy New Year all. Thank you, David James Flood. Frank Lennon as well. Thanks, Nick. He says, and a superb 2025 to you and your family. It's right back at you, Frank. Thank you so much as well for participating in the group and the channel. Stalwart companion since day one. And I appreciate you showing up and contributing and adding value all the time. Really is fantastic. PW says freedom. Yes, that's a great way to end. Jeanette, thanks, Nick. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. Gwen, I don't know if I shouted you out earlier, Gwen. Apologies if I didn't. Very lovely to see you again. Complimenting me on my Frederick Morton book about the Rothschilds, saying that he's a good author. He wrote a book about Crown Prince Rudolph that I read about 30 years ago. Oh, it's good to hear. Awesome. Alrighty, I'm going to wrap it up there then. And I'm extremely grateful to you all. Very happy to be doing this, and keep an eye out because there's much more to come. We got about 2 hours left here in England of 2024. Enjoy celebrating the end of the year wherever you are, in whatever way suits you best. Remember that we have so much potential as a species to be creative, compassionate, kind, and caring to one another. Patience costs nothing. Optimism costs nothing. Problem solving costs nothing. You can bring a real abundance to your own life and the life of the people around you just by choosing, by virtue of your free will, to bring those qualities to every situation you encounter. So meet the challenges of life with a grin and a smile on your face and a good attitude and a willingness or an intention to overcome and survive and make it through and pass on the valuable lessons and the knowledge and the wisdom that you gain is always worth it, right? And all the hardships that come our way, God tends not to give us a cross that we can't bear. So bear that in mind as we move into 2025. I'm sure it's going to be a wild ride. So fasten your seatbelts and wear those crash helmets. But yeah, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care of yourselves and each other. And until I see you again, I'm going to be back. Let's see. I should announce when I'm back. Later this week, right? Friday the 3rd. We'll be back continuing our Milner Fabian conspiracy chapter on the EU. So until then, God bless.